So it's 1:03, and I am going to get started. So I do want to thank all of you for joining us today. We are so excited to be hosting this Grassroots Mural Workshop. My name's Shelby Fiegel. I'm the director of the Center for Community and Economic Development at the University of Central Arkansas. And we also run the Community Development Institute, which many of you might be more familiar with CDI than our other work. I have joining with me today from my staff, Dylan Edgel, my assistant director, and then special guest, Andre Archer. He is our intern at CCD for this semester, and he's going to be helping us out today. We're really excited to have him. So I do want to say we have a fantastic agenda lined up for you all. I want to thank our partners at Thrive first and foremost for helping us coordinate this workshop. And it kind of came out of they had a project for youth in Helena, West Helena, where they taught them how to do a mural and actually took them through the mural development process. And I saw that and I was blown away that that was happening in the state. And I am not an artistic person, so I was very interested in learning about that process. And since I was interested, I was hoping we'd have others throughout the state that were interested in developing a mural as well, if you're not familiar with that process. So I want to thank Will Staley, Misty Staley, Sarah Melby, and Ryan Biles with the Thrive team for being with us today. They're going to be presenting the primary piece of our agenda, talking about the importance of branding and marketing, and then as well as the development of a mural. As a part of this workshop, we do recognize that Zoom is a very stagnant platform that doesn't offer a lot of opportunities for us to engage in one another. So for the latter half of our program, we're going to go into breakout rooms, and we're going to have some panelists share their real life success stories and things that they've learned along the way. And those people are going to be Jason White, Dustin Bork, and Christy Graham. And we're really excited to have them here. They are experts in the field of art and quality of place and quality of life, placemaking, and mural development. And we're really excited to have some open conversations with them in the breakout rooms. So I don't want to waste any more time and diving into our agenda. Hopefully, if we had somebody else join that needed to get on, they were able to. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Melby with Thrive and Ryan Biles, and they are going to start our presentations. And I do want to say, please keep yourself on mute throughout these first presentations. You'll have plenty of time to talk during the breakouts. So I'll turn it over to Sarah and Ryan. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share our screen so that you guys can all see our presentation as we go. So I'm going to pass it off to Ryan here to get us started.
Yeah, well, first of all, we just wanted to begin and thank everybody for making time to join us today. This is work that we're really passionate about, and we're also really passionate about partnerships. So a lot of gratitude to Shelby and the team who have been fantastic partners. And we're just grateful for the opportunity to be here. And we're going to talk through about 5 different aspects today on creating murals in your community, and really begin with some building blocks, primarily centered around community branding, murals in context, talk about different types of murals, and then get in a little bit, if we have time, into funding and having a discussion about that with our other panelists as well, getting their feedback on what that looks like. And the fun part, and probably the part that you're really most excited about, is the how-to, right? It's the nuts and bolts of how to get this done. And so that you're gonna really enjoy that, and Misty's gonna dive into that with us. So briefly about Thrive, we say we empower communities to thrive through good design and youth engagement. Those are really 2 sides of the coin that make up the work that we do here. So a big piece of what we do is we work. We are graphic designers. Sarah's a graphic designer. I'm an architect. Will's a designer as well. And what we do is we work with municipalities and nonprofits and chambers of commerce and other groups around the state in our region to design branding elements and identity systems for these entities. And so our graphic design work, our professional design work, allows us then to fund the other half of what we do in our nonprofit, which is our youth programming and engagement work. And that's something that you're going to see today, where all of that converges for us is these special projects, and we're just honored and excited to share with you a little bit of our experience as a team, and doing kind of both of those things in these really fun environments around the state. So for us, we really want to make sure that you understand that, again, this community branding piece is the bread and butter of what we do. We really enjoy working with cities and teams around the state to walk through a process of helping teams discover their brand. So this discovery process is really foundational to creating a brand that reflects the community's character and the community's intent. And it's really important that your team that you assemble in undertaking this work is inclusive, and it really represents the diversity of the community that you work in. So it's essential that there be a variety of voices around the table. And notice I said voices and not faces, because a lot of times we'll invite people to the table and then we'll tell them what to think. And the important part about these workshops are that you bring people who are ready to provide input, ready to provide their perspective, and that everybody's coming at it from a different lived experience and cultural background. So we're going to talk about a few case studies in which we've done these workshopping processes or worked with the community to go through this discovery process. And again, this is what we do as branding strategists and consultants, but it also touches on this aspect of how brands are extended out into the community and become part of the built fabric and the physical fabric of the community. So Thrive is based here in Helena, which is where we're at today here at the Thrive Center. And in Helena, you've probably seen this brand. This is actually some inherited work for us. This brand was developed many years ago, and then the rollout of this collateral and elements, Thrive has been involved over the years in different aspects of how to do this. Most recently, building out a new website for the city and adapting these elements that are core to the brand, which you see in different aspects, banners along Cherry Street, the welcome signs as you come into town. The A&P uses a version of it, as well as the city. And so working with the city most recently to adapt these things and kind of bring it into the 21st century and make sure that this brand is consistently applied. And of course, as you see at the top right of the screen, it extends into the physical environment as well. This mural is one that's right just across the street from where we're at. And Misty's going to talk about that a little bit later. But the point of this is just knowing that as you work with a community, sometimes you inherit some elements, but how do you leverage and understand what the importance of those individual pieces are, and then leverage those to, again, extend out the messaging of what happens there. The city of Van Buren's one we're really excited about, and this is another opportunity to thank CCED and Shelby and Dylan for their work. This was a fantastic partnership through a new initiative that we started last year, which was the Request for Assistance program, in which Van Buren was selected in a competitive process to receive a branding consultancy. So our team got to be in Van Buren, do multiple workshop sessions with them, again, bringing these voices around the table and having a vibrant, multiple vibrant workshop sessions that yielded some powerful creative results. And it was very iterative, so we would develop parts and pieces and work with the community, get their feedback. There was, community stakeholders were around this table. And I will tell you that what you're seeing today, this is, again, different applications of the brand that was developed, a little mock-up of what that brand could look like in a physical context on the water tower, and then some other collateral there that could be print or digital application of their community brand. But you're getting to see this before it's been officially rolled out, so you're kind of getting a sneak peek today. But so this is something that our design team is really proud of, because it really has the heart of the community, and this is the community's signature and fingerprint, not just Thrive, but it's all of us together, which is really cool. We work with our friends at the Batesville Chamber and their regional partners there in Independence County. Thrive developed the Experience Independence brand, which allowed them to work on essentially a regional travel initiative centered on different activities that are available in their area. And we've also, through the years, worked on different pieces of collateral for the chamber that represent some marketing elements as well. One here that's really close to my heart, because I live in Lone Oak and this is my hometown, is the work that Thrive did back quite a few years ago, back in 2016. again, in partnership and in collaboration with CCED and Shelby's team, Lone Oak was the Kickstart community in 2016. And one of the 6 action teams that was developed was a branding and marketing action team. So there was direct input and grassroots feedback and really a lot of good design input from the community as the design team at Thrive developed the brand. It was really a hand-in-hand partnership, again, facilitated by UCA, and this was done about 4 years ago. The brand that you see on the screen there to the left was fully adopted last year in 2019. And then now in 2020, we'll be getting a website update for the city, as well as other applications that you're going to begin seeing in various ways physically throughout the community. And as we're discussing today, murals, hopefully the application of this brand in a mural is in our future as well. So this work, which we love to do, our professional graphic design work, is really our bread and butter, and it allows us to then fund the work that you're going to see today, which is the work we do with our students and our youth in our youth programming. And Sarah's got a lot of hands-on experience in working with our students and the things that we get to do in our programming.
So I'm going to take my mask off.
Putting mine on.
Yeah, so as Ryan mentioned, we have kind of a two-sided organization here, which really is not actually two-sided, but the one allows for the other one, and they go hand in hand all the time. So with our programs, we've had kind of a long history of what we do. As you saw, our mission is to empower communities. And we want to do that through community development and in art. And over the years, we've had everything from fairs to small business incubators. But what we really started seeing was that the people showing up to do the work and that were invested were the youth. And so we decided to dive into youth programming and youth education. And we ran into this challenge here, that there's a complete lack of artists and designers in rural places. And I think probably a lot of you are from rural places and probably have seen this. And that lack is showing up in the lack of public art. You know, we go to big cities like Kansas City and we go to Little Rock, and we're seeing all of these pushes towards art and culture in public spaces, and there's a lack of that in rural places. So we want to address that, but where we found this natural, unique opportunity for us is for us to do that with students. So this is where we see our mission here is to push for that community development, for that art in public spaces, but using an education piece with students to accomplish that. So we started doing a variety of programs with our students. Some of them were to create environmental kind of interactive design for a concert series in Helena. And we enjoyed it, the kids enjoyed it, they came to our space, we created things, we cut out wood, we used power tools, but we weren't seeing the impact that we felt like we needed to see. And it wasn't as visible. There was, one part of the community was showing up to this. We were not getting the word out and pushing for community development the way we wanted to. So we started doing a few more public minded community beautification type projects. So that lower right hand corner with the 3 girls painting, that was one of our first student murals that we did. And we partnered with the Boys and Girls Club over a week in the summer. And we kind of thought, I'm not sure this is gonna happen, but we committed to doing it, and we showed up. We did a mural in 1 week, and we had probably 6 students helping us. And it was one of the best experiences we had with students up to that point, was starting with a plan, and we got something done in 1 week. And they were able to see the entire project happen in that time. And one thing that I'll never forget, one of those little girls, the one on the left there, said, every time I drive past this corner, I'm now gonna see this mural and say, I created that, and I made this corner beautiful.
That's so powerful.
And it just was awesome for them to see. And we started seeing that not only were they having fun for 1 week at a time, and we were accomplishing our goal of community development as drawing people in that murals do, which Will's going to talk about a little bit later, but we also were offering these skills to the students that are job transferable skills. They're learning, project planning. They're accomplishing a whole project within that week, but they also are developing a pride in their place. And in Helena, I'm sure you guys probably know a little bit about Helena, but that's a big deal. And it's a big deal for our students to take some ownership and pride in the space that they've created and that they've contributed to. So our most recent one we did is one that says, "I am the future," which you'll see in a little bit. And that one I think is the most powerful to date for the students because they get to claim that and they created it. And so we've really found a way that we can activate our youth and accomplish a myriad of goals at the same time. But you might be thinking, I don't have a program like that I can just say, let's go paint a mural. And that's okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about what it takes to build your team to accomplish this. So you might also be saying that you're not an artist or you're not a mural painter, and that's okay. So the biggest thing to realize is that it doesn't have to be artists and it doesn't have to be muralists on your team. You can, and I think that's really important. And Will's going to talk a little bit more about this, but it's extremely important as you're building your team to invest in the art ahead of time. So if you don't have the artists on your team, that's okay. That can be a separate thing. But to develop your team, I think a lot of you probably already have an idea of who the stakeholders in your community are. And if you don't, that's okay too. But you're going to want to look around and see who are the people invested in this, who are the people involved in putting this community on the map, who are the people involved in making sure that our community's story gets told. And if your community has a really strong brand, who was part of developing that? And that's going to be a core team for you that you get to decide what your team accomplishes. So you might also have a group of artists in town or an arts organization. It's extremely important to identify that group if it's there and bring them on board. You might already have a group of students that are painters that are at your school and they have a painting club and you bring them into this. But however you identify your team, once you have people together, you get to decide what that team is responsible for. So we've had, like I said, a variety of different teams. We've had our students where what we found works is that we do the hard part of designing the mural, getting the approval from, whatever building we think we want to paint on. We get the approval from the owners and we do the tracing and we get the funding and we get the paint. And the kids show up and they get to do the fun and visible part of painting it. So we had a kid interviewed for TV that was like, painting a mural is so easy. I show up and I pick a wall and I start painting. And we were like, well, okay, there's a whole lot that goes into it, but that's the whole point, is that they're getting to experience the more visible part of people driving by and honking and saying, great job, you're doing great. And they're learning, but we've already done the hard part. So what your team does is up to you. Your team can choose the location and say, this is a location we think is good. So as far as location goes, you don't want to choose a back road, not visible, off the beaten path wall for your mural because you want it to be highly engageable and highly accessible. So you want to choose very visible, high traffic areas, something that is going to make a splash and going to be a little bit in people's faces. And as far as establishing a theme, like Ryan said, it's extremely important to leverage your community's brand. And so if you have a strong community brand that someone is in charge of, involve that person and make sure that that theme is carried throughout your mural. But if you don't have that person and your team wants to decide on a theme that empowers your community or contributes to the narrative, that's great too, but it doesn't have to be something that your team is responsible for. It can be up to the artist. So as far as teams go, we've done everything from AmeriCorps students. You can see them clearing the wall. Misty's going to tell you about prepping a wall space. We had a grant that we submitted to AmeriCorps, and we got 15 kids. They're somewhere between high school and college that came to Helena for 2.5 weeks to just do projects. And we had to come up with the projects for them, and we had a lot. And we've worked with a whole group of adults, like you can see on the lower left in Lone Oak. The lower right-hand corner is 2 of our students that regularly are involved in our programs. And so your team can look very different, and it's really per community. That's what I guess I want you to take away, is that there's no one way to do a team. It can be all students that just come in and paint after the decisions are made, or it can be all adults that stick with the whole process throughout. So that is all I have, and Will is going to move into your big picture.
Thanks so much, Sarah and Ryan. And so now we'll have Will Staley and Misty Staley share their screens and move into the next part of our agenda.
Okay. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So can you guys see the screen very well?
Yes, I think you're good, Will. And I do want to tell everyone, if you have questions, please feel free to utilize the chat throughout these beginning presentations, and we'll reply to them as needed. And our panelists can also jump in replying to those as well.
Okay. So I wanted to just kind of get, kind of step back a little bit and talk about the big picture. And that we're talking about murals within. Okay, so creative placemaking, that's the big terminology that we're talking about right now. What?
1 second, we're fixing the screen.
Yeah, I think if it was supposed to transition to the next screen, it has not done so.
It says sharing is paused.
Yeah, sometimes you just got to restart it, Will. I think Zoom is experiencing some issues today. We already run into a few. There we go. That's it.
Okay. Fingers crossed, you guys. Okay, so creative placemaking is the terminology in community development and in economic development. Lots of these buzzwords come and go, right? But this one's been around for a good 11 years now. It is an industry, it has conferences and all that kind of thing. So that's what we're talking about here. And just a quick definition from some experts on this, from the National Governors Association. Creative placemaking occurs when artists, arts organizations, and community development practitioners deliberately integrate the arts and culture into community revitalization work. Community development strategies that integrate the arts and culture are better equipped to draw on and support existing community assets, preserve and enhance the authentic character of place, and ensure equitable outcomes for local stakeholders. Through creative placemaking, the arts and culture can strengthen communities by helping revitalize local economies, provide rich engagement for youth, advance educational outcomes, create spaces and places where people want to be, facilitate authentic engagement in community planning, reimagine uses for vacant properties, and improve quality of life for existing residents. And so on this one, I just want you guys to know about this really amazing resource that you should download. Go to nationalgovernorsassociation.org, nga.org. There's a great action guide that you can use when you're getting your groups together to do the endeavor of making murals in your community. All right, there's also something to know, stepping back, we are selfie culture now, right? Like Instagram is everything. We have these things called influencers. So when you take a picture in front of a pair of wings in Batesville, bottom left, you get to post that, but then you also get to say hashtag, I'm in Batesville, and that's great free marketing. That's better than paying for a $700 quarter page ad in the magazine, you know, so that's also what's happening. So also something that's happening is that brands, these big boutiques, they're incorporating murals into the sides of their shops and their buildings. And because they understand the importance of influencers, you know, contributing to the brand. And it seems like it's less murals aren't really translating to consumers as another ad. It's more of, it's art, it's expression. But the good thing for us is that we create these murals that are very place-based, and we generate foot traffic, and people want to come see our space and play in our towns. So I'm just going to talk about a few case studies, just so that everybody kind of knows what's happening in the state and also regionally. So Fort Smith is and I'm going to try and rocket through these real quick, but Fort Smith, this is a town, this is the second largest city in Arkansas. They have doubled down on the creative economy and creative placemaking by hiring a global curatorial consultancy called Just Kids to create, in partnership with the local nonprofit 646 Downtown, an annual event called The Unexpected. In this event, Just Kids selects from a group of world-renowned mural artists, and they descend on the city. They do work with UAFS, the community college there, and there is youth involvement and community involvement. But they do, so that this is just probably an outlier example of what murals can do in a community. They now have about 30 to 35 murals in their community. They also have an app connected to all the murals, and this event, if you haven't been, is really fun. I'm not sure if it's on for this year, probably not, but you know, maps are a thing that we're seeing a lot with cities that embrace murals. Little Rock. So Inspired Little Rock is a partnership of the Downtown Little Rock Partnership. The top right is an example of an artist named Jason Jones. He was one of 70 proposals that was chosen. It's a $30,000 commission, and that's a 5,000 square foot mural. The bottom is an example of a cornbread mural in Little Rock and commissioned in the Soma district. And it's based off of a really successful cornbread festival that they have. So they've got Cosmo the cornbread singing a song to all the other weird vegetables. I love that one. They also have incorporated a map. You can find this at the Conventions Bureau website. And it's just a great way to have a fun afternoon or day, have some lunch, and go up and down Main Street and see some murals. Cersei and Cabot. This is, I wanted to just bring up Jason White, some of Jason White's work. He's in here. He's done most of the murals you're seeing here, sometimes collaborating with a graphic designer on a couple of those. I think the two in the middle were in that way. But also they have something really fun called the Artist Alley, and I think it's once a month they have a First Fridays kind of event where they have an open, ever-changing canvas, and just brings a lot of people downtown, and it looks to be like a really fun event that's got garnered tons of community support. Their organization that's kind of behind the scenes is Think Art Project. You can see bottom left, they've got a great example of a map there too. So there's all these different ways that murals come to life, and there's organization behind them. That's kind of what I want to get across here, is that there's no one way to get a mural launched in a community. Batesville, talking about Dustin Bork. He's also one of our panelists. This is a really interesting way of going about getting a mural done. He's a professor at Lyon College, and they actually have a mural class there. So he goes out and he works with students to beautify the town. One of the biggest ones that they did was this Coca-Cola mural, bottom left, massive undertaking. And basically there's a lot of revitalization happening downtown, and it's a place that you want to walk around. Also, the local high school has gotten involved, doing a series of storm drain murals. So that's a really fun project too. And a couple of the organizations that are behind the scenes are Main Street Batesville, Batesville Area Chamber of Commerce, and the Batesville Area Arts Council. So talking about what we heard earlier, you can identify some natural stakeholders that'll make the project go even faster or even smoother. And lastly, I wanted to throw in here some work that's happening across the river. So we've got bottom left is Clarksdale, Mississippi. They actually have done a blended incorporation of local artists, but also have imported in some visiting artists from South America to kind of come around and do some mural artist in residency pieces. So a lot of the murals that you're seeing on those walls are actually done by South American artists, and there's different cost structures there too. To the right, those three murals are located in Greenwood, Mississippi. Bottom left in that kind of quadrant where you see Greenwood, Mississippi spelled out, that's a good way to just kind of do an easy extension of a brand into your area. And you can stand with that, take a selfie. People know exactly where you are. And but again, you see the wings on the right. Everyone likes to stand in front of the wings, so that's that's a really kind of popular one. But top right, just to kind of land on something that's really important, is that this great blue herring, and even bottom left, we got all this blues music and rock and roll kind of visual vocabulary happening. That's really kind of fundamental to community murals. What are the unique stories that your community can talk about, and that's where that's really what's important in choosing the kind of design you might want to have. So what kind of mural do we need? There's a couple of classifications that I would use here. Beautification. I tend to think all murals are beautification, but here's a great example of a old gas station on the corner that was a real eyesore, and now it's been turned into a fun striped outdoor classroom. Stripes and color blocking are really a more simple kind of application of a mural that can go a really long way to making your community look great. And then again, we touched on this boys and girls mural, really high traffic location, restaurant that's had hopes and dreams for a long time but never panned out to anything and was becoming kind of an eyesore. So we got a great relationship with the Boys and Girls Club, and we had that summer mural workshop, and we're just happy that that turned out so nice. Storytelling. So we looked at the Helena brand earlier. A story is being told through the design of the original Helena logo, and that is that Helena wants to be thought of as a historic destination. And so we pulled out the colors that you can kind of see on this building, kind of historic color palette, and then this historic looking typeface, and applied that to a surface in the city, which is an extension of the brand. And then this is one of our most recent murals This is another kind of narrative that you want to see in the Delta. You know, what are the foods that people are eating in the Delta? What is Delta cuisine? So we pulled that out and we put that on the outside and did a major facelift to a food pantry in Helena. Last but not least, an interior mural for Delta Heritage Trail. Recently, they announced a $40 million investment in the Delta Heritage Trail that will connect Barton to Arkansas City. Rails the Trail Park project. So this is, you know, what does the superintendent of the park want to do when the governor is going to give a speech about the investment and do a ribbon cutting? Let's make a bike mural, and let's really reinforce the idea that we can be a biking destination in the Delta as well. And so we got to work with a great group of AmeriCorps volunteers on that. All right, from there, I will stop sharing and let Ryan kind of chime in.
Yeah, so we'll be brief on this to make sure we keep the program rolling here. But one of the things that, you know, is often part of the conversation of cost, right? Or I would say, what's the expected investment? And a point we want to make here is that all of the work that you're seeing here involves designers and artists. And please remember that in order to do this with excellence, you have to compensate and pay your artists and pay your painters and pay your designers. It's very much a function of quality and taste. And so I would love to hear Jason and Dustin chime in on this, because the things you're seeing on the screen was a very wide range of investment. Some of the murals in Fort Smith are approaching $100,000, and you know, you saw everything from a $2,000 mural to a $30,000 to more than that. And so we're going to talk a little bit about cost and funding, but I would love Jason's perspective, and Dustin, yours as well, please.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys having me. This is an excellent program. I'm so excited to be a part of this. Yeah, so funding, usually question number one. It's a different situation. You know, people are used to branding in some regard, and they understand advertising. And I say this, you know, really loosely when I say people understand advertising, because that's a whole different world altogether, right? What I have ran into is, like you said, they don't understand what the cost should be, could be, you know, where it needs to fall, and a lot of times what they're getting for their money. You know, you guys have made some excellent points through the presentation, and you're absolutely right in terms of the lack of artists in some of these areas. You know, I travel all over the state and have actually traveled outside of the state doing murals in some of these smaller communities. So it really, for all the city, you know, leaders on this call here, it really is one of those things where you get what you pay for.
Yeah, and you know, another point to be made on the cost and funding discussion is that there are grants out there. There are, you know, endowment for the arts grants. There's some state grants, some foundation grants, or and depending on the focus of the entity who might be funding it, they might have a specific emphasis they want to make, such as public health or physical activity, that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
That's what I was going to chime in and say as well is, so again, thanks for the invitation. This is an awesome conversation, and I really like to be part of it. It's really inspiring to see what's been going on statewide. I think anytime I get a chance to spread the good word about murals and art, I'm always really enthused and excited. So I appreciate it. And, you know, thinking about murals, I think they can be very infectious too. They can be a really great advertisement for the community, a great sense of civic engagement and pride. The second we're working on a mural, we get hit up by other stakeholders and business owners and building owners that say, hey, we would love a mural. So a lot of times we find that we're educating folks as well. And so I've gone about this a little bit different perhaps than Jason. We started a murals program at Lyon College as a way of kind of answering that need and making art be sort of a centerpiece in our community here in Batesville as part of a kind of broader mission of revitalizing our downtown. So we've had murals that have been free for some folks. Lyon will provide some of the materials, or we'll get a sponsor like Citizens Bank or another bank, for instance, and they'll pay for it. So we've had some that cost us $300. We've had like the Coca-Cola one. We had a lot of partners in that. That mural cost over $15,000 to restore. It had a lot of community partners. The city had to close the road down. We needed to get lifts, multiple lifts. There wasn't a lot of space to fit the lifts in. So, they had to close the road. The mayor's office was involved, the building owner. So I would say the majority of our murals cost about $5,000, and that sometimes pays the students or the artists, and sometimes it doesn't. So I think for us, it's been a great learning opportunity because the students are able to make a mural, learn about them. And I'm going to give a shout out to two of my students who are in on this call, Victoria Hutchison and Daisy is here as well. And they've both gone on now from being involved in the murals program and done their own murals as well and paying gigs too. So they found that these are lucrative, employable, applicable skills that they can go back. Victoria went back to her community in Missouri and educated them on murals, and she was working on one, and another community reached out and said, we want one of those. Another great way, so we had, and I'll share in our small breakout session, we had one mural that Will showed an image of, the blossoming one. That represented Main Street, that represented the downtown, is how it's been recently blossoming. It also represented the nature in our region. Hey, shout out, we have a map too. This is this is the Batesville Area Arts Council provided this, and so our murals program has added about 12 different murals over the course of this last 3 years. But for this, we got a Department of Arkansas Heritage grant. And then another one that I just wanted to share with you, I did crowdfunding. I did a fundraiser on Facebook for people to donate. We raised $1,000 in 4 hours to create a Unity mural. So I think we've covered the whole range of just private donation, volunteers, free murals, expensive murals, and many different sources. So.
Yep. That's excellent. Thanks, guys. That's really what we were hoping to touch on, is give people kind of an idea of the breadth of this. And before we go into these breakouts, both Jason and Dustin are going to be part of these breakout rooms, so y'all will be excited to hear more from them as they kind of dive into their work, and just really grateful that they made time to be with us today. Before we do that, we're going to really dive in now to how to create a community mural, the nuts and bolts of how this is done. And so Will and Misty are preparing their screen to share here in a minute, and Misty is going to be leading us in the step-by-step process and all the kind of the technical factors of being able to create this mural, and talk a little bit about all the moving parts and pieces that go into this effort that you've seen here on the screen today. So Misty, the floor is yours.
Oh, Misty, make sure you unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
We can. You sound great.
You can see the screen.
Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everybody. I'm Misty Staley. I'm Will's wife, and they include me on murals, which is really fun. I enjoy that. I've written down a ton of notes because I didn't want to forget anything, but I thank everyone for being here today, and I'm so excited to share with you my mural knowledge so that you can beautify your city. And I'm going to touch on each step that I take to paint a mural with the students that I work with. And these are all steps that you can do on your own with a little knowledge. I've been painting murals now for 16 years, and I've painted murals in Atlanta, Georgia, New York City, and Helena. I love working with students for after-school mural workshops and Thrive's Helena Design Crew. And these are some of the photos of the murals that we have painted. Let me see if I can click through them. This is the Grace Food Pantry mural, which you guys saw earlier.
Well, and I hate to say, I think it did the same thing where it's not loading the screen. So you might have to stop and reshare real quick. Very strange that it's doing that. There we go. It's there now. You're good.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you, Shelby, for pointing it out. Did you see that change?
I did.
And this is the I Am the Future mural that Sarah touched on earlier. This is great. We have a lot of graduates stand in front of it, little kindergartner kids. We see a lot of classes in the future coming out and taking pictures in front of this. We love this mural. These are the students we worked with. You can see that this was a COVID 2020 mural. We had a local mask maker make some Thrive masks, and then I splatter painted all of them, and we wore those during the mural painting process, which I think it was 102 degrees outside that week. So it was hot, but nobody passed out. These are some other freestanding murals that Will and I worked on. We actually won a governor's award on tourism for these, and they're life-size postcards around town, and you can take pictures, and you're encouraged to post with #VisitHelenaArkansas when you post these. This is the Boys and Girls Club mural that we worked on. This is an interior mural. It really took a kind of drab wall in their cafe area and turned it into something that the kids are really proud of. The Boys and Girls Club was closed earlier this year. They're open sort of again, but they were doing some science experiments and some at-home learning experiments in front of the mural, which I thought, yay, they're using it as a background. These are some levee wall murals, and talking about going back to the Helena logo and how you can incorporate your logo. Here on the Youth Can Make a Big Impact mural, you can see that we put the Helena sun in the background. So it's not an in-your-face Helena logo, but it brings that in. So getting down to some things that, some talk of, okay, I'm ready to get my hands dirty. Like, let's hold a brush and let's get this done. So talking about how long will it take to paint the mural and who should paint it. So the size and detail of design determines the number of weeks. So when I paint murals, I like to have a level of detail that takes 1 to 2 weeks to paint, with about 1.5 to 2 hour paint sessions per day. So I'll have my kids after school Monday through Friday for 2 hours, and I'll want a level of detail that I can finish up. But what's great is Will's my husband, so we get to sit on the couch, and I'm like, I want this to look like this and this, and he's so good at laying it out on the computer. I love that part, but I can say it's too much detail, we're not going to be able to finish that, or thinking ahead in that way. You want to know how long it's going to take so that it can get done in your time frame. If you're working with adult volunteers, you could think about maybe 1 to 2 weekends on the mural with longer paint sessions, maybe a 4 hour per day paint session. Just think about your volunteers and what they will need. This time does not ever include my surface prep or drawing out the mural or designing the mural. This could take 1 day to 2 weeks or more. So think about that ahead of time. My class size, I really find it beneficial to have anywhere from 8 to 15 volunteers, depending on the age of the volunteers. I find when I have too many volunteers, it makes the space too crowded and people don't always have something to do. If you want to include more volunteers, I would recommend maybe having them come in sessions. So you can see here, these are some kids painting, and I like to have that number of volunteers based on kind of the length of my wall, because we want to be able to spread out along that wall, not be right on top of each other. Who should work on your mural? Sarah talked about this earlier a little bit. Do you want younger kids? Do you want adults? Just talking about what I've done in the past. When I work with younger kids, I like to start at ages 8 and up, and I may plan like a 4-hour workshop and have the younger kids come for the first 2 hours, and then the older kids and adults come for the second 2 hours. This allows sort of the kids to put down that base coat, and then the adults and the older kids can make those fine lines and detail. Seems to help. I also like to think about keeping kids on the ground and then to save my ladder work for older kids and adults. With your younger, I like to say most expressive kids, it may help to outline an area in the paint color that they're going to be painting in. It's sometimes easier for them to stay in the lines that way. I always like to plan my setup and my breakdown time into my class time. Volunteers can help you unload all of your supplies from the car and then set those up at the beginning of class. And then volunteers can also help you wash out all of those paintbrushes at the end of class, which is very helpful. A little tip, to limit the number of dirty paintbrushes, I usually assign maybe 2 paintbrushes per color. And then you can, those are dirty, but different kids can switch those around and use them. Because I found that if you have a lot of paintbrushes out at your mural site, they will all get used. So you want to think about, okay, I don't want this to take me all afternoon to wash all these brushes out. I find it's helpful to have several cardboard boxes to put your paint buckets back in at the end of the day, and then you can set those into your car. You don't want to just keep all the paint each day in your car necessarily. A really hot day can really dry out your paint. But the box also keeps your car a little bit clean, so your back trunk doesn't look like a splatter paint workshop. Now you might be thinking, where should we paint our mural? So when choosing a building, think about visibility, think about what Sarah said, but also think about the type of wall you'll be painting on. So you can see a photo here of some old red bricks. Sometimes they're even more powdery than this. They're like a powdery orange brick. You don't want to say, I'm going to paint that wall, and you just go out there and paint on it. Those type of walls, you need to think about sealing, then you need to think about priming, and then you can paint on them. You can see over on the right at the Grace Food Pantry, the big chicken leg, that was on a brick area. Those were pretty new bricks, but think ahead of time. If you're painting on a brick surface, it takes longer. So to get down into all those grout lines on a brick wall will take a little longer than painting on, say, a solid concrete wall. Yeah, and we used a paint sprayer on those bricks for the base coat for the primer, and that was a big time saver. You can see here the levee wall is a concrete surface, and then our future mural was a cinder block surface, but the cinder blocks had a really shallow mortar area, so it was pretty easy to paint on. Another thing you want to think about is make sure you get permission to paint on the building before you paint on it. So usually you can call up the building owner and show them some mock-ups of your mural. So wall prep. You will want your wall to be scraped and primed before you start. And any rotten wood replaced with exterior wood. So think about pressure treated wood. It needs to cure like anywhere from 6 months to a year before you're supposed to paint on it. And this is so the paint can adhere properly and it will not like peel prematurely from the wood. So keep that in mind. All the peeling paint on your chosen mural wall, it needs to be scraped. And then your wall will need to be primed with an exterior primer if you're painting outside. Maybe you also, before you prime, need to pressure wash your building. You just keep in mind sort of, you want to take as many preparations beforehand that will make your mural last as long as it possibly can. You can see here the Grace Food Pantry. This is what it looks like before. This is the mural afterwards that has the chicken leg and the okra and the carrot and the Delta Foods. So we were so blessed to have AmeriCorps here, and they were happy to help us prep this wall. But just prepping this building took, I think, a week and a half with this many people. Had to replace some rotten wood, scrape, prime, but they did a great job. If we look at here, this is a 12-foot ladder, the orange ladder. So you want to think about the height of your mural. I like to keep the height of my mural working with kids at like 10 or 12 feet or below. I'll usually get up on the tall ladder, but keep the kids on the ground. But that way you're not having to get scaffolding. You're not having to rent boom trucks and lifts like you had heard before. So keep that in mind as well. And this is the Grace Food Pantry after it was totally primed and prepped, and then afterwards. And then going back to one thing, speaking of ladders, you might want to get together some waiver of liability forms just to have your volunteers sign those before they're out at the mural space, because you are working with buildings with maybe rotten wood that could fall or tall ladders. So it's always a good idea. So drawing out the mural, this is pretty tricky because it's like you have this huge wall and maybe you can do some sketches on paper, but when you have a huge wall, it's a totally different ball game. So the way I like to get my murals on the wall is with a projector. It's tricky to draw out a mural on such a large scale, but it could be done if you wanted to grid out your image, your small image, and then grid out your wall and then do each of those squares up on the wall. But it's so much faster if you put a projector on it at night. And you might say, at night? I have to go out there at night? Yes. So you need it to be dark when you project the wall so that you can see the projection. So something to think about before you choose your building. Drive by it at night. See if it's pretty dark. Like 1 or 2 street lights won't matter, but if it's really well lit at night, it might be a little harder to see your projection. You can see some pictures here. That's projecting the interior Boys and Girls Club mural. You can see it's pretty bright because we can just flip the lights off. And then the carrot on the Grace Food Pantry. So you can see how bright it is at night. But Will and I just bought a projector that was supposed to project in the daytime, and it was a dud. It did not work. So we're still sticking to nighttime. One thing to think about, since you are going to use a projector possibly and put it up at night, you need access to a power outlet. So if an exterior plug is available on the building that you're using, that's great. And if not, you can ask the building owner to take an extension cord and run that outside of their building, plug it in and run it outside, and then it will be ready for you that night to draw out your image. We thought we had an exterior plug on the on the Grace Food Pantry mural, and then it didn't work. So I'm telling you this, so learn from my mistakes is what I'm saying, because Dustin was painting a mural the same week we were, and on his building, he had an extension cord outside, and I was able to sneak over and use his extension cord. So that was really great collaboration that you didn't even know you were collaborating with.
I know, and I'm glad we met and we didn't even know it, and we collaborated before we even met also. And I gotta just say, Misty too, her work is really, really great, but she is so fast, y'all, because it took me about 3 weeks to do my mural that's right beside hers, and she knocked hers out in less than a week, I think. So very impressive.
I did have a team. I had all the students out there with me. Something else, you're outside at night, take some bug spray, especially in the Delta, you'll be eaten alive. I trace out my murals with a black Sharpie, but make sure you have a couple in your pocket because that rough surface of the wall, it will wear down the tip, so make sure you have enough. And then when you're projecting out your image, it's on such a large scale, it's not going to be super crisp lines. It's going to be pixelated along the edge, like little squares. So just kind of, it might be kind of a dark layer of squares and a light layer of squares right up next to each other. Just kind of choose a line between those and go with that line throughout the whole mural, and it'll be close enough. You can see on the carrot a little bit of the squares. Next thing you might be thinking is, well, what kind of paint do I use on a mural? We use house paint. I always try and use a paint and primer in one is what I really love to use. Brands that I personally like, Benjamin Moore Bin brand is really great. It's thick and it goes on in maybe 2 coats. Clark and Kensington is what our hardware store was carrying, and it was also really good. When painting outside, make sure to use an exterior paint. And I always paint with acrylic instead of oil paint just because I'm working with volunteers and students. And acrylic paint is so much easier to clean up. and I'm making sure that I prep my surface really well so that that paint will stick. So I've had really good results using acrylic, although if you're working on your own, you might use oil. What sheen should you use? The way I usually look at it is I'll go with a flat paint. If I'm painting a mural that I want to look historic, like that Helena mural, I think it's here, yeah. I used a flat paint here. You can see I worked on this mural by myself and not with kids, so I got to take a little more time and do a little more detail. And you can see how I have sort of an orange layer under the yellow, a bright red layer under the dark red, a dark blue layer under the blue. It's just, it gives it almost that weathered look and that sun-drenched look, kind of powdery look, to make it look like it's been there for a while. But then with our future mural, I used a gloss sheen because I wanted it to look new. I wanted it to look crisp. So any sheen will work, and you can think about what you're trying to put across in your mural. A painting tip, when you're out painting in the sun, we were in full sun in this future mural. If you'll take some like Walmart sacks, some plastic grocery bags out, and wrap your brush up in one of those when you're not using it, and that'll keep it from just baking in the sun and getting stiff while you're out there. I have tons more tips like that, but I'll share those with you guys individually later for time's sake. What about brushes and other gear? I really love to use a 1.5 or 2 inch angle brush. I really find that crisp edge comes in handy. It does not have to be the most expensive brand, but that sharp edge is really great. Another tip, if you'll show your volunteers or teach your volunteers, when you're done painting, I know it might be on the top of the paint for a while if you drop it back in the bucket, but it's going to sink to the bottom and you'll end up with paint like halfway up your brush, so halfway up the handle. So if you'll show your volunteers, lay your brush across the top of the paint container when you're not using it, or wrap it up into that grocery sack, and that'll keep things a lot less drippy. Should you use paint rollers on your mural? Maybe. From my experience, sometimes my students get a little crazy when I give them paint rollers. They'll just like roll right over the lines that I've drawn out. So I think a lot of times a smaller item lets them get where they need to go. So just think about that with your mural and your volunteers. You might need a paint roller. Other supplies you might think about: drop cloths, tents, ladders, smocks or paint clothes. Since this is a community workshop, maybe you want to create a t-shirt that talks about mural or city beautification, and that's the shirt that all your volunteers can wear, just like the Thrive masks that we all wore. Hats, sunscreen, maybe a cooler of drinks, and then music is always really great. It gets the party going. I thank all of you guys for being here today, and I just want to say this before we split into the breakout rooms. I'm happy to get even more in the weeds with you on topics like how to hold your paintbrush to keep messes and drips at a minimum, or correct temperatures for painting outside so that your paint cures properly, or how to wash out your brushes properly each day. Even how to plan for some rain days during your mural painting week, some fun indoor activities. This process is so fun, and it does not need to be scary. We at Thrive are happy to work with each of you as your design firm and consultancy. If you wish, we're here, we're helpful. I can walk you through each step to take with your specific mural design on your specific chosen wall. And I'm also available as a consultant during your mural install week for a quick phone call with any issues that pop up, because I'm sure that I've had some of those same issues, and I can tell you how I fixed them. So you don't have to be scared. Just reach out to Thrive if you need any mural help from us, and we are happy to help beautify our state. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Misty. This is just such a wonderful opportunity to see how this works, and really we've been watching a lot of the chat while you've been speaking, and there's been a lot of good relevant discussion and questions, and now this is going to be our opportunity to jump into workshop rooms with Jason and Dustin, and so we've got some guests who are going to do that. But before we do, just wanted to thank thank Shelby and Dylan for the opportunity to be here. This is our team here. That's our contact information here. I hope y'all will reach out to us. You know, we've been talking how murals are a powerful tool for economic development and placemaking when they originate from a thoughtful discovery process, right? And really a process that reinforces the identity that a community has intentionally developed to tell its story. So Thrive has a toolbox of offerings that for branding your community, and for you, as you begin, you're thinking about murals, but you might have realized, hey, really, we might need to consider starting foundationally with the rebranding exercise as part of what we do to inform the character of the public art and the mural strategy that we're going to develop. So we'd be pleased to hear from you. All right, Shelby, that's all we have before we break out.
Well, thank you guys so much. And I'm also going to reiterate all the thank yous. You know, we all have to thank each other so many times, or it's just, you know, it's not appropriate. And I want to thank Thrive again for partnering with us. And I especially want to thank our panelists, Dustin, Jason, and Christy, who have already been providing so many great additions to the conversation, especially in the chat. So glad you guys are here, because Dylan and I would not have been able to answer any of those questions without you, because like I said, we're not artists. So as Ryan alluded to, we are about to go into breakout sessions. We really think that these breakout sessions are a huge value add to this workshop. So in the breakouts, we're going to have Jason, Dustin, and Christy, as well as UCA staff, so myself, Dylan, and Andre, and then Thrive staff, so Sarah and Misty will be together, and then Will, and then Ryan. And I've got the breakout rooms set up. All of the participants have been randomly assigned to a breakout room, but we are going to be recording these, so just be aware that every breakout room is going to be recorded. So if you, wanted to know what the other group talked about, we're going to send out one full recording that should have everybody's breakout rooms in them. So with that, I'm not actually going to ask everybody to come back together before we end. I'm going to go ahead and do our closing comments, and we're a little bit behind on time. So I do want to say all of our panelists said that they are good. And Thrive and our team have said that they're good to go past that 2:30 mark. So if you want to keep going in your conversations past 2:30 in your breakout room, feel more than welcome to do so. We're going to stay there until you're done talking. So our staff is prepared to go on past that 2:30 mark as well. And we'll be sending out a follow-up email with those recordings, with presentations, with the notes. You got everybody's bios and contact information. So if you want to reach out to a particular panelist or speaker, you should have their email addresses. And with that, we're going to move into our breakout rooms and get started. So you'll see on your screen, I'm opening all the rooms. Everybody just select to go into your room. And then I'll be moving into room 2 as soon as I see everybody's joined the room. So see you in a second.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
It will.
All right. So I guess I'm the moderator. Fun. And we're here with Dustin Bork, and we're going to talk shop. And Victoria, too.
And Daisy.
And Daisy.
Yep, they're both my students, so I'm going to actually have them contribute as well, because they've been in the trenches, as it were, and did a lot of the painting.
Ah, awesome. All right. Well, do you have anything in particular you want to start off with talking about, Dustin?
Well, I think one of the aspects is, how do you get started, right? And as a community member, I think what we've learned is there's definitely been a learning curve. So for us, you start to get identified as an artist in a community. And that's awesome, because I like to be able to share my talents and also share my students' work. One of the things is, like, as an artist, typically you make your work in your studio, and then eventually you find an audience for it, but that's much more individual. With murals, you have an opportunity for it to be much more community centric. And so it's been a case where in Batesville, as people get to know me as an artist and get to know what my students do, we were continually asked, how about a mural? you should do a mural, or come to our business and paint a mural, or hey, there's this great wall, wouldn't that be an amazing canvas? But that was it. It was, you know, just kind of this dangling question with not a lot of answers. And we actually found, my wife and I both found as artists, that a lot of times people just didn't know. It's been a case where we've been educating them on how to get started with the process, making sure that, you know, you're going to be able to fund the mural, that it's an appropriate location for all the factors we talked about earlier, but also you're going to be able to, you know, find the right audience for your work, and that you're going to be able to fund it, right? Which is an important part. So because we kept getting asked to do free murals, I figured let's find a way that we can make this valuable for the students. So to give them an opportunity to learn how to do murals, to find community partners that would fund it. And so Lyon College was doing about a 50-50 partnership with either the building owner or the stakeholder, or in some cases, another community partner like a bank who would sponsor half of the funds and Lyon would provide the other funds. So it was a way to get some murals going. And then, like I said, murals are very infectious. So we found that as the word started to spread, people would ask us to do an additional mural. So it went from me kind of having to create a void, fill a void, to now where they're becoming very popular, and we have a waiting list, right, in the community. Yeah. So.
Gosh. So, yeah, I actually, we had a guy come knock on our door yesterday and say, hey, I want a mural on the side of my van. I'm doing a food truck. And I was like, all right. And you know, it's like, no one ever talks about money, but I was like, what's your budget?
Yep, exactly. That's the first question, always.
Yeah, what's your budget? Because that tells me like what you're gonna get on the side of your truck, you know?
It's true, it's true. And yeah, we had a county judge reached out to us, and he's actually a Lyon alum, and I think he was well-intentioned. He thought, wouldn't this be a great opportunity for you and your students, right? We always get this idea of exposure. So I'm educating y'all right now too, so please don't use that word around artists, because you would never go to a caterer and say, how would you love some free exposure, right? Cater my meal for free, and everyone will love the food so much that they'll want to next time pay you to do this, right? So a lot of times as artists, we get asked if we would like to do something for free, because how amazing is exposure, right? But not just, you know, as you have learned, murals are expensive. They can be a costly, you know, endeavor for all the parties involved. But the way that we do it is we really like to offset those costs as much as possible. So it's not like, me as an individual artist is trying to get rich off of this, or personally profiting off of this. It's more a learning opportunity for the students, but giving high quality murals to community members who are interested. We're doing one in Cave City right now, which is pretty cool. So we're branching out. We're doing one. They noticed that we were doing them in Batesville. They said, wouldn't it be awesome to continue and have this sort of like tourism destination that we can connect these, and later do an Ozark gateway map to connect Independence County, Sharp County, these surrounding counties, so that someone could do a driving tour, which is really an awesome idea. And when she reached out to us, I said, yeah, here's what we usually do. What's your budget? And they had a decent sized budget. We'll start some sketches. What are your ideas? What would you like to see with this? And we can brainstorm, we can get together, because we want to make sure it's appropriate. We might have our vision for it, but the client or the stakeholder or the community might have a different vision for that. So we like to get to hear as many voices as possible, and then show them options. A lot of times we might just show a sketch. So the sketch is just a vision. It's not necessarily a finished product. And I think that's an opportunity for stakeholders to be very vocal and say, it's not quite what we expected. And that's okay, because we can go back to the drawing board and give them more options as well. So it was interesting because Crystal, who is the liaison for this library commission that we're doing in Cave City, she said that when I proposed the budget, which is a fairly hefty budget, it's, you know, about $7,000. including renting a lift and the paints and paying my students this time because they're not doing it for class credit. That's my thing is if they're getting class credit, they're not getting paid. If they're not getting it for class credit, I want to pay them, right? And we do like an hourly rate as they get more, and they do really, really awesome work. So you're getting a professional mural for a little bit more affordable than if you say, you know, went with, you know, someone out of state, certainly. You know, Jason White does amazing work from Cersei, and his work is very, very affordable. So don't think that I'm knocking him when I say this, but you know, you're going to get a much more affordable rate when you ask us to do this in terms of you know, the budget and the idea. She said that our budget proposal and our estimate was actually cheaper than the professional contractor that was just going to paint the wall a solid color. That's not usually the case. This brick was about this deep. Victoria has been working on this. She's been helping me, and it's a slow process because you're having to paint around every single brick, and it takes time.
Yeah, painting brick. Oh boy.
I love cinder block. Cinder block is ideal. So if any of you have cinder, if you're looking for locations, inside drywall is just perfect. It's ideal. It's just like butter. But outside cinder block wall is just amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Does anyone else have any questions that they'd like to throw out? Anybody that's in the group interested in having a mural done in your area, or feel like there's a lack of murals? Or and you have to press the unmute button if you want to say anything. So, Dustin, how did you're a fine artist? I've seen your portfolio. How do you like the transition to? It's not a transition. It's just a furthering of your skills. How do you like the transition to mural work?
Yeah, it's a good question. For me personally, a lot of the murals that I've executed, I've seen as being like the ownership is with the community. The ownership is with the stakeholder and not necessarily my work. So I love that aspect of it. My personal art is abstract. My personal art maybe is not everybody's cup of tea. So it's not something, my artwork generally isn't something that someone wants to take a selfie in front of. And that's my sort of professional work that I exhibit in galleries and museums. But the community murals have been an opportunity to, they're great for de-stressing. I feel like it's definitely cathartic to work on a mural. And a lot of times I have volunteers and, you know, people from the community say, they'll drive by and say, hey, do you need help? You know, are you getting paid to do this? Is this free? Because if it's free, I'd love to jump in and help. And so for me, that's been much more of like a process of education as opposed to just me personally spreading my artistic vision.
Yeah. And we found that, you know, during the summer, we had pressure to continue to do programming, nonprofit programming. And because of COVID-19, we were really hesitant to do anything. But we found that the murals and the kind of like, if we can get a space that's just long enough where we can space kids out and we wear masks. I mean, the kids were like, oh my gosh, yes, please, anything, get me out of here. You know, I want to be outside. I want to do something. So that was quite a nice change, because it was like when we were working on that future mural, it's like no one had seen anyone, and we were just like all crawling out of a cave.
I can definitely relate. I'm a people person. I'm an extrovert. I've been teaching remote and virtual, so I'm still seeing my students, but it's like this. It's through a computer screen. The general kind of personal interaction isn't there. So for me, recently being able to do the murals, I've done 5 murals. It's kind of staggering to think about since the pandemic started. And for me, it's just really helped me to keep my sanity. And it's been great to see my students in person and my former students that are helping me, because I need that interaction. We've been having some great conversations as we've been working on these murals. And I'll have Victoria chime in here as well, because she graduated from Lyon College and she was the inaugural group of this murals program that we did, and she's gone on and done some of her own murals as well. But what I've really liked is now her program is online, so she's been in the community still here in Batesville. So she's helped me on 2 of these murals, the blossoming mural, which I'm going to share my screen if that's okay. Absolutely. And I want to share this with you. So we worked on this, but I just want her to share too, just kind of like the process as an artist of working on these, and how she was able to educate some younger artists when she was working on this process. So Victoria, share your thoughts.
Yeah, so like Dustin said, I graduated last year from Lyon, and I'm currently in my master's program for art therapy, actually. And so I'm supposed to be in Tallahassee right now, but everything's of course online. So I'm back in the community, and I've been helping Dustin a little bit with these murals. And since the murals class at Lyon, I went on and did 2 murals of my own. Some people reached out to me after seeing the work on the Coca-Cola mural, and were like, hey, we've been looking for someone local to do these murals. Would you be interested? And so that's how they kind of found me. And since I've been back in Batesville, I've got to help Dustin, and it's been really nice to come back and just paint murals and kind of have that time, and to get to work with some students now being graduated and into like a master's program and doing murals on my own. It's really nice to get to talk to them and see how they're trying to plan out like doing murals on their own, and being able to give like friendly advice or help about like all the logistics, because doing one on your own versus just kind of showing up after Dustin has executed it all is very different. It's very much different. But Dustin, I think, has well prepared us for that on our own. I think that class does a good job of not just like showing up to paint, but also showing you the logistics of it, like talking about a budget, planning for a lift, or, you know, things like that, learning how to communicate with the people that are funding it, with if you have a team, you know, things like that.
Victoria, how does, you're going into art therapy, is that what I heard?
Yes.
We talked just a little bit about that just a second ago. Is that something that you're thinking about maybe trying to incorporate in? Because did you feel like it was that it's a therapeutic kind of thing? Because I hear that from my students all the time.
Yeah, it definitely is. So art therapy can kind of go 2 ways. It's used very personally as like a mental health counseling that you can work one-on-one as a therapist. I just incorporate art into my practice. So if we were in a therapy session, instead of just strictly talking, we might make a painting about that. So like that type of art is very personal, and it's actually like confidential and things like that. But as far as murals, it kind of goes into more as like art as therapy, which is also a part of art therapy. And it's just like that process. I mean, you get so many things. You get communication, you get social interaction, you get focusing in, you get grounding when you're working on a mural, and it can be very viable and very beneficial for certain populations. So I've definitely been interested in like getting certain groups, you know, that it's like a good team building skill, you know, for leadership and things like that. It can be very valuable for some groups. So it's definitely further and upcoming, and I think I'm really interested in trying to expand that possibly. I have like a year left in my program, and so I'm still learning a lot, but.
Yeah.
Will, do you have to worry about when say Misty is doing a group project with like a local school, confidentiality or sharing images of the students while they're working, or PR that goes out once the students have worked? Or is it, you know, is it just like, since it's a community thing, it's a public thing, it's okay to share that? Because I'm thinking now, like with Victoria's background and her experience in the Arts Council here, I'd love to do a community workshop with some kids here in Batesville.
Yeah, we send out a photo release at the beginning of things. Absolutely, and you know, we do that a little bit beforehand if we can get it to them by email, so that they bring it to us beforehand. But yeah, they sign a photo release, and sometimes there's kids we can't shoot, you know.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, my wife has the same issue when she does the kids workshops in the summers, that there are sometimes students, especially the different types of population, if they're like, you know, from a foster family or something, that, you know, they can't disseminate their image. I have a question for Daisy, if you don't mind me stealing your moderator duties for a second.
You go for it.
So Daisy has had an opportunity to work with different clients as well with the mural class. she did a mural with a local Montessori school. And I think with that group, they had a pretty clear vision of what they wanted. And she worked with really, really young kids that helped to the design process. And then also she is now working on her own solo mural in Georgia with a corporate client. And so I just want to ask her what it's like to work with stakeholders, and how kind of hands-on are they, hands-off, in terms of you being an artist and picking your design or vision for their project.
So the first one that we did when it was the Montessori school, that was very hands-on. We had a meeting with all the students that they have at the school there, and they got to tell us like what they wanted to see in the mural. And then that was a whole class of us. So we all made up our own sketches of what we thought the mural could look like. And then the kids kind of like voted on them, told us what they liked about it. And then the teachers, like the owners of the school, they kind of gave us their input. And then we ended up doing kind of a mashup of a few different sketches. Nobody's really won. They just kind of picked a few things from each of them. But that was really interesting because they were very involved in the whole process. And then the one that I'm doing right now is I'm mostly just working with one guy. He's kind of the manager of the place that I'm doing it at. And he kind of just gave me free rein. He gave me a few ideas that he had, but for the most part, he let me do pretty much whatever I wanted, and he's really open to everything. So there's definitely a lot of different people that I've worked with. Sometimes they're really involved. I kind of like it when they're really involved because it makes me feel like I'm really making sure that they're getting what they want. But I've worked with a lot of variety of it.
Daisy also started one at our local VFW, but she had to put that one on hold temporarily when we moved from in-person instruction to remote because of the pandemic. So I hope that she gets an opportunity to still do that mural. So sometimes we like to think of murals not only as branding and civic engagement, but sometimes these murals can be like community service and an opportunity to give back. So that's something that's kind of near and dear to our heart, to think about, you know, not a corporate client or not necessarily a community, civic leader, but maybe it's a school or maybe it's, you know, a VFW or something like that. We even had the local juvenile detention center ask us if we'd be willing to work with their population to create a mural that's inspired by kind of the mission of the institution as well. So I think if you're thinking about murals in your community, there are sometimes very obvious maybe locations or businesses or community partners like the mayor's office, et cetera, the courthouse. But there's sometimes atypical opportunities and canvases that you might not expect, like parks, schools. I love that one that y'all did that was a restaurant or the food pantry, because didn't you have the people that were helping with the food bank help with that as well, or some of the volunteers were related to it?
Mostly just guidance.
Okay, yeah.
The guidance from the get-go, but yeah, no, it's I'm curious to hear. Have you guys had any negative feedback about any murals or?
Yes, yes, we have, and that's where. Yeah, that's where I started to learn more about really allowing the community to have a voice and a say. They keep telling us do more like the Coca-Cola mural and less like these urban projects that we've worked on. So it's really a matter of listening, which I appreciate. I really do. I want to know, because I don't want to just put my vision, or the students are really concerned about that these are going to be attractive and long lasting. You don't want, when you finish this, to the community to say, can we paint over this now? That's really, defeating. So we'd rather people celebrate them, love them, want to take selfies there, share in the pride that we take in them. So I'll let Victoria talk a little bit about the controversy that we had in Batesville and what we've done to sort of resolve that issue moving forward.
Yeah, so we did have a mural that was in collaboration with an artist that Dustin knew and brought in, and she was great. And it was her design, and we got to help her kind of implement that. And she got to show us like new techniques that she used with like stencils and spray paint and things that we hadn't seen in murals. And it's not even on like a super busy road. I mean, it's downtown, but it's off of the main strip. It's like a road over on just the side of a law office. So it's not like super in your face, but it's there. And it actually just blew up on Facebook, which is random. People got on Facebook and were just confused about what it was. And it was two girls with like a gradient background. And then one girl has like tape over her eyes, and the other one, is it like she's holding her hands over her eyes, Dustin?
Yeah.
The hands are holding up the face in both cases, yeah.
Yeah, and then like one of them has tape over her eyes. And so a lot of people were confused about what the message was. A lot of people were like, why is this? I don't even realize why they were mad, because they were like, why is this bringing awareness to, like, maybe they thought it was about domestic violence or sexual assault. And they're like, why is this up? And it's kind of like, well, why do you not want to bring awareness to those issues? But that was their argument, that it was like either too political or too in your face, or an issue that I guess they didn't want to talk about or aren't ready to talk about. And it didn't have any words on it. It didn't have anything connected to it. It was just someone put it up on Facebook and decided to take their opinion and run with it. And it got a bunch of comments and a bunch of backlash from it, of people just not understanding what it is. And we tried to put out there that, you know, it was about, I think it was about social media and kind of that new age, about the power of social media and things like that. And people were just not happy about it.
And ironically complaining about it on social media.
Yeah. That's what Facebook does. I mean, it is the soapbox kind of social media platform. But,
well, I wanted to share a positive aspect of social media. So one of the things that we've done moving forward is, first of all, it's just been a really awesome opportunity to be involved in murals in the community. You know, I'm on a first name basis with the mayor. He'll email me, he'll reach out. If I see him at places, he'll always be like, what's the next mural? Let's get another mural happen. The county judge texts me from time to time. And so it's just been really awesome to be part of that, you know, movement, and to have community partners and feel like you're being appreciated and you know, part of the discussion. So this was a mural that I did because of social media. I was getting frustrated during the pandemic and some of with the social injustices that were going on. Without it, I didn't want it to necessarily be a political message. I just wanted to say, hey, we need unity right now. This is a difficult time, and it doesn't matter to me what your political beliefs are. I think there was just a sort of antagonistic approach to arguments and being divisive. And whether someone was conservative or Republican or liberal or Democrat, you couldn't see eye to eye. It was always just name calling and the lowest common denominator, and just not seeing eye to eye. And I thought with Batesville, we have a community that's very positive, sharing, very diverse. And so we wanted to create something that was a visual reminder that there's more that unites us than tears us apart, right? So this was that crowd-funded mural that I did. And on social media, I put a call, would anybody be interested in seeing a Unity mural? Here's a form to be able to donate. I thought I'd raise, you know, maybe a couple $100s. And I said, I'm willing to do this for free myself. I'll design it, I'll paint it for free. I just need the materials. And we raised $1,000 in 4 hours. I was just floored. I was just so pleased with the outreach. And to me, it said, this is the right time and this is the right community to make this happen. Within a few days, we had a number of locations because I didn't have even a wall to put it on. I didn't have a design yet. And people were like, let's see this happen. I had a lot of community volunteers to help me paint this, which was really awesome. We were all wearing our masks. So, you know, we were properly social distancing while we work on this, but it was another aspect for me, you know, not just working with students, but working with some community members as well. And the result was, you know, it's something that people, and it's on the back of the library, by the way, the public library in Batesville. You know, helped bring people together, I feel like, through something that had kind of a negative overall connotation.
Beautiful. I love that. Yeah, I was following along as you were doing all that stuff. And didn't you raise some money for a fund for some other
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, that was our next step. And for me, kind of thinking about, I don't want to be the only person doing this. I want to hear from other voices as well. Like when I said, when people want to see more Coca-Cola murals, it's like, you wanted to see advertisements. Well, what do you mean by historical murals? And so we're creating this venue now, this format. We did a fundraiser. Look at that branding. We did Unity masks to fundraise. I ordered these, paid for these, and then we're using the funds. We started a new public art fund in Batesville so that any artist can apply or any business owner can apply to have a mural added. And it'll go through like a community approval process. And these funds that we're raising money now through the Arts Council for can be used for any business owner or any artist in the community. That's kind of our way of thinking about how this is a community project and not just individuals working on it, to kind of have a little bit of, I think, cohesion too with the murals, so they don't just seem like individual murals, but part of a broader theme. So that's been really exciting to start that and to see where the next step is. For me personally, when, like I said, when the mayor, has reached out about certain things, the county judge or the chamber has been very helpful for us. We have a great area chamber, the Batesville Area Chamber of Commerce has been very involved. I love what they do. They've gotten a lot of recognition in the state, but also regionally, nationally for initiatives that they've done, which Thrive did a great job with the Experience Independence. We love that logo. We all have stickers of that on our cars. It's a great logo. But there was no official approval process. And so that's one of the things for our community. We don't want backlash. We don't want to be offending people. We're not trying to be, propaganda or political. We're not trying to do like street art or guerrilla art where it's like, hey, this is our message and we want to be in your face about it. We want to do some things that we know are fitting for our community. So we don't have any formal approval plan. That might be different in different cities. The one thing that we do have is if it's on Main Street and the building has never been painted, you can't do a mural there. If it's facing Main Street, it's in a historic district, it can only be over top of other paint. So that's a pretty simple rule, but nobody looks at it and okays the design. And I'm thinking that eventually we're going to probably do something that makes enough people upset and then that would change. So we just want to be proactive and make sure that we're including different partners, and we don't want to offend anyone. So that's part of it. Other cities though, perhaps where you're located, if you're looking to do a mural in your community, you might have it's the same kind of thing with advertising, right? You might have some rules or approval process that you have to go through with a local, maybe Arts Council. Or
yeah, we have the A&P Commission, Local Advertising Promotions Commission, is what before Thrive kind of got involved in mural things. Misty was doing it on her own, and that's where basically a panel of commissioners would approve a design, and usually there were some guidelines, we'd like it to be historic or something like that. And we've had a mural design get shot down before, for sure. So
I started the mural in Helena, and the guy who paid for it, he just thought since it was on his own building and he chose the design that he was good to go. And when I primed it, I guess the A&P reached out to him, or who actually his father-in-law, who was the building owner, he had a business in there, and he didn't get permission. So he's like freaking out. He's like, send me a high quality image of what you're doing. I'm like, what's going on? Because I assume, I guess I shouldn't from now on. That reminds me, if I go into another community, do you have permission? Is there any formal approval process? Because I don't want to be.
It's usually those Main Street locations, those main streets that have gotten designated as a state of Arkansas Main Street. They'll have historic district commissions, so that'll be a group of people that even approve the kind of signage.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And then, just to keep it kind of like the historic fabric in place somehow.
It's interesting though, because I think it creates almost a hierarchy. Like, does art need to go through all these different hands? And I think that if you can do it, and just even the title of this workshop, Grassroots Mural Workshop, right? Grassroots meaning like, if the people want to see it happen, it's good to go. I don't like the idea that that unfortunately sometimes it has to be so formalized.
Yeah.
But that said, it's usually pretty easy to work with those groups, because we have one too that's the Downtown Preservation and Historical Society is the one that if you've got a building that's already painted and you want to add a mural, they want to just see it. And it's a pretty simple process. Hasn't been anything more elaborate than that. But Victoria's had an opportunity also to work with stakeholders in the design process. How was, like, she did one for a museum. What was that process like, Victoria, in that design approved that you did?
Luckily, it was fairly easy. I did not have a lot of opinions or input. They basically just came to me and they said, yeah, we're wanting a mural, because there was an old mural there. I mean, it was just like white paint scrapes by the time I got to it. You couldn't even tell what it was. And they were like, we want a new mural here. And so they wouldn't let me power wash it, which was a task, but I sanded off as much paint as I could. And they were just like, we want it to be about the town and about the area. That was all they gave me. So I just kind of ran with it. Luckily, I knew a little bit about the area, and I kind of talked to some people, did some research, and I threw a design together, and they were like, yep, that's perfect. Let's go with it. And I threw a budget at them, and they were like, okay, cool, that's great. So luckily, I didn't have a lot of opinions to go through, or like back and forth. It was pretty cut and dry once the committee all got together, because it was the board that was the board of the museum that ultimately approved it. But once they finally got together after that, it was pretty much just like, yep, that looks cool.
Yeah, and there's, if you guys look at the case study of Fort Smith, they had a lot of backlash with how they went about getting some of their murals completed. But they eventually incorporated getting the local community college, UAFS, involved. But kind of the way they think about
they just pushed theirs through, didn't they? And there was some people not happy about that.
There was a lot of that. But at the same time, I don't know necessarily how to feel about that, because they basically gave them pretty loose guidelines, which was, here's our community, here are some stories about our community, and now you can be informed or inspired how you wish. And so they got, I think they just got, and so there's a nice freedom to that, I think. But it's just it's a different direction. And if you're gonna open up that can of worms, you better make sure that the people that you're inviting have really nice portfolios.
Well, D-Face is one of the most famous street
Right.
artists and graffiti artists in the world. If you invite him to Fort Smith, I'm not going to tell him he can't do his thing, you know what I mean? And so
Right.
if it's on a wall, I think the problem is, though, and Will and I talked about this a week ago when we were like pre-gaming what we were going to do for the discussion topic for this breakout session was, is it better to have local artists? Certainly that's going to be great because they know the community. Or do you want to get these big names, these world-renowned artists, because that's going to give your community some maybe cachet, some credibility, some economic and visual tourism? I think it's a fine line, because they asked them to interpret Fort Smith, I think that bridges the gap. But those artists like Doze Green, for instance, he was one of the original New York City hip hop street artists, did graffiti, moved to California. He does a mural in Fort Smith. And honestly, I mean, his work is beautiful. It's a great mural that he did inside of a theater, but it really does not have anything to do with Fort Smith.
Yeah.
And I think
that's where it's kind of hard,
it's out of place, and it doesn't seem. Now, D-Faces, he responded to Fort Smith, but did he only respond to the negative aspects that Fort Smith doesn't want to be known for anymore? He kind of saw Fort Smith as this like Wild West frontier town, and I don't think that's really the tourism image that they're going for currently. I love them. I would love to go see them, but for me, they're almost like museum pieces that just happen to be in Arkansas town. versus, you know, Paint Memphis. I don't know if y'all know that as a case study, but Paint Memphis had a similar issue where they just asked artists, and a lot of them were local, which was pretty cool, but they didn't get any say from the community leader or from the community partners. So a lot of them got put into neighborhoods. One was like Elvis, but like this contorted, distorted, evil looking Elvis. And you don't mess with Elvis in Memphis. So that really made a lot of people upset. And another one, it was like the zombie, which I think was cute. I mean, it looked kind of like a Scooby-Doo zombie. It wasn't like anything like horror, like, you know, really, really R-rated scary. But, you know, they were saying, what does this, and it was mostly a lower socioeconomic neighborhood, had a lot of, you know, minorities living there. They said, we don't relate to this. This doesn't speak to our experience. You're not telling our story. And so they actually decided to paint over those murals almost immediately after they were done. Ironically, get this, so the city council voted to paint over them. They painted over the wrong ones. They painted over the ones the community actually liked, and they left the zombie and the scary Elvis. So I think it's one of those things you definitely have to have a conversation, and that's where you know, you guys have been doing with Thrive and the community branding. That Lone Oak logo is awesome. Like, that would look amazing on the side of a building. If it's something that your community has already had a say in, I think that's a great place to start with branding, and just keep kind of that community aspect in there, and maybe avoid the really super touchy subjects, right?
Yeah, and when it comes to our smaller rural communities, I mean, everything's touchy, right? Like, everything seems a little touchy, and we're a smaller pool, and we're trying to all get along, and so more inflammatory kind of subject matter is just not going to make you friends. And you know, a smaller community, you know, lives or dies based on how motivated different factions are to actually work together. You know, those different groups actually working together are going to be what actually gets people on the same page and show up to these larger community planning meetings that are so hard to get people on the page. So yeah,
I think it's empowering though too, because the work that you're doing is really cool, and small towns can make a difference easier. We had a visit from More Explore, which is the northeastern Arkansas. They do 2 publications. One's a web series blog, and the other is they produce a magazine. And they came and they did a mural tours because they wanted to find out more about what's going on with the murals in Batesville. And they said, man, it is so awesome that you're doing this in Batesville, that it's in a small town, because they feel like in Jonesboro, where there's more artists, maybe more support for the arts and things that are cultural, they don't see a lot of connections with different groups working, or groups willing to work together. I hope I'm not knocking Jonesboro if anyone's in on the call from Jonesboro. They said there's a ton of potential there, but that for them, it's harder to say, get grants. There's not as much, I think, you know, there's this pulling at your heartstrings. If you're like a small community, like Searcy got that $1 million, you know, small town grant. Batesville has been able to get some grants with the Impact Independence. Local banks have then invested in that as well. So they've made it possible to fund some of these things, whereas sometimes it's harder in a bigger community. So I think whether you're a large city or a mid-sized town or a small town, really think about using your community partners and the people that have an investment and a stake in the community to make these come to fruition, because it's a very tangible thing. It's something that you can point to. Sometimes things like economic development things seem so much longer to take to develop, right? So if someone's doing like a restoration fund or something where you might change facades and there's grant funds for that, or low interest rates, those things seem to take a lot more time and sweat equity and approval process. boom, murals can just really make a pop and get those things to happen. When we first moved to Batesville about 10 years ago, there were the vacancy rate, or the, buildings downtown had probably at least 3 or 4 businesses that just were abandoned. And now you're hard pressed to find real estate to get shops and stuff. And I'm not saying that we're responsible for that, but we're just one piece of that growth,
Yeah.
which really just is inspiring to be part of.
Well, I think murals are an overall picture of health and a symbol of momentum, and that can be very inspiring to communities. That said, we're over time, and we want to be respectful. And Andre, I'm sorry to not acknowledge you. I hope you're enjoying your internship. And did you want to say anything?
No, I'm enjoying it. Just listening.
All right, good deal.
What school are you from?
Central Arkansas, University of Central.
Awesome, great, very cool.
All right, everyone. Notes will be sent out by the UCA team, just to summarize everything that was talked about today. And so we really appreciate your time. Dustin, thank you so much for being a part of the panel. Victoria, and what was your name again?
Daisy.
Victoria and Daisy.
Yeah, thank you so much, Will. Thanks, Victoria, and thanks, Daisy.
You're just very open with your process and your work. And so I think it was 2 or 3 years ago when our group from Lone Oak, our contingent, came up to Searcy, and you really opened up and talked to us about your process. I think you got some work out of that visit as well, which was really cool.
I did.
So I just want to thank you for that. This for me was a cool connection to be able to come back and was really glad that Shelby included you on this. I'm like, Jason's doing some work, y'all, around the state. It's really fantastic. So
I
I'm like, oh yeah,
opportunity. Yeah,
it's cool. It's cool.
Well, Ryan, I do have some questions. You mentioned importance of building a team. How and I'm in Huntsville, Arkansas, in Madison County. And I would definitely agree that we face the challenges that you talk about with the rural lack of designers to reach out to. But can you talk a little bit more about how and who really needs to be in a stakeholder to get us started with murals in our community? We do not have one. We're getting one this week, but ironically, Oz Art is putting a large mural on one of our historic buildings in town. I'm very excited about it. I mean, it's just starting. So we got to kind of skip the funding part, which is unheard of. However, one of my other questions is regarding I'm going to have to build some community support around it, because literally it happened, the city council approved it, and it's happening, and we're going to have a mural in less than probably 2 weeks. So I want them to feel like part of the community. However, they have not had any input in it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you know who your artist is going to be?
Yeah, I do. The concept really does fit with Madison County. They're doing Kings River Falls, which is iconic in our area, outdoors, cool. And what we're looking to move toward promoting more and more in our city. Samuel Hale is doing our work. We're very excited about that. He's done a lot of murals in the Bentonville, Bella Vista, Rogers area.
Awesome. Well, I would
familiar with.
I would like Jason to talk his perspective on this first, since the situation that you're in is you've already got your artist on board, and and they have work to do, and they have a subject matter. So it's kind of like, how do we get the community to like what we've already decided, which is a great question to ask. So I want from the artist perspective, but then I'll come back around and tell you a little bit about maybe some of our experience on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
If it were a different situation, just to apply generally. So.
Yeah, no, being able to skip that part is a great blessing. That is always the hardest part. It's interesting. I've noticed through the whole conversation that we had, I'm definitely coming at this from a different angle. So being the artist, and this is how I put food on the table, for myself and my family. I'm definitely approaching it from a different way. But through my experience and with some of the communities that I've worked with, funding is always the issue, right? And so I've kind of taken it upon myself, and it's worked out well so far. I've actually gone out personally and found sponsors to be able to come into communities and do exactly like skip the step that you've had to skip with the funding. How big is the community there? How many people?
About 2,400.
Okay, all right. So yeah, you would be a prime candidate for, you know, somebody like myself that's looking for somebody else to sponsor funding to be able to come into a community like yours. A community that size, it's definitely difficult to find the stakeholders. It just is, you know. The great thing about it, I'm approaching it from a sense of public health. That's been one of my greatest sponsors so far is local hospitals. So for example, we have Unity Health and R-Care here, and both of those organizations have fully funded art projects for me, and that's allowed me to be able to come into smaller communities and get work done.
That's a great tip. Thank you so much.
What's the closest hospital community that you guys have there?
Washington Regional in Fayetteville.
Okay.
We do not have a hospital in Madison County.
Okay.
So that would be our closest one.
Brandy,
Yeah. So
do you have a clinic in Madison County?
We do. It's Boston Mountain Rural Health. So they would be a possible partner located out of Marshall.
Yeah, I think that would be great to reach out to them and see.
Yeah, I do too.
I know a lot of our rural health units, especially Jason mentioned R-Care. R-Care is probably the leading health unit that I know of involved in community economic development. We see R-Care everywhere because they have that rural perspective, and they really understand that quality of place, quality of life is essential to public health.
Yes.
So I think that would be a great place to reach out to.
There truly is a mental health aspect to public art, and we've seen it so much. We had such a negative conversation going around our community here. Searcy's a community of 25 to 35,000, depending on if Harding's in session or not, you know, and you know, everybody has something to complain about, you know, but it almost seemed like as soon as we started providing public art, that whole conversation changed, and it went from one mural that I kind of didn't have permission to, I had permission to paint the wall from the business owner, but we didn't go through all of the city ordinances and all that stuff. And it was kind of an issue. And then all of a sudden the city just rallied around it. And we went from that one mural to, I think I've got somewhere around 9 murals in our community now.
Yeah. You know, Jason, I'm glad you said that. That reminds me, that's one of the early things that you taught me is if it's commercial speech, it's regulated by sign code. If it's not advertising a specific business, it's art. And so one requires a different process, or maybe none at all, versus one that does have.
And every community is different. You know, everybody's different. But yes, for ours, that particular mural, it took me about 3 weeks to do. That was the very first one I painted in Searcy. It was the first one that's been painted in Searcy probably in the past 8 to 10 years, you know. And so I guess sometime during that time we had a sign ordinance come on. Nobody said anything about it. I painted this whole mural over the course of about 3 weeks. Nobody said anything. As soon as I put the business owner's name on the side of the building, it hit the fan. And that's when we, again, they came, you know, the whole, like, this is illegal, you're not allowed to have it, all of that stuff, simply because I didn't put a border around their logo. And so, but once we got it figured out, we got it figured out, you know, and the city really rallied around it.
It's kind of funny because so I'm an architect, so that's my day job. I draw buildings, I design buildings, and it's one of the things, especially in our rural communities, it's hardest to understand. People dive into the municipal codes as homeowners or as business owners, and they get so frustrated and confused, like, I didn't even know I had to do this, and why do I have to do this? And the message I tell them is like, that's why you hire a professional. That's why you have an architect, an interior designer, a professional artist involved, a graphic designer involved in this, they know the questions to ask before you jump in and get it in over your head. And sometimes it's because we do things and learn from experience. Sometimes it's because, look, we know this code because we work with this day to day. And what's funny is that very same municipal code or development code that you had to abide by for your sign permit is the same one I have to abide by if I'm going to design a building right there in Searcy. So it's great. And again, the emphasis point here is compensate your artists, because they take on the ability to work around this body of questions that as average citizens, we may not know what to ask, but they know what to ask and they know where to go. So Brandy, I want to touch on just something really briefly, but maybe more generally, since you have a specific situation in Huntsville there at the Crossroads. But I would just say that these are things that I've learned from Shelby and from being exposed to what they do down at CDI. Just make sure that you have the broadest spectrum of community voices at the table. What we're learning in Lone Oak is that we have an expert right around the corner. I have a guy who worked for ADFA at the state for years, who's now our our economic developer. He was voluntarily doing this work for us for many years. I have experts on water surface drainage, and right around the corner, I mean, it's just like there's an expert in your community. So as you might say, well, what is a person who is, what does my county extension agent perhaps have to do with anything? Your county agents for your Division of Agriculture know everybody around the state. They're expert networkers, and they know, the specifics of what happens in your community from an agricultural perspective, which involves more than we might think of. Your bankers, your county agents, anybody in economic development, and I will say, please do your best to get your elected officials on your side, which is a lesson that we learned in Lone Oak 4 or 5 years ago when Thrive went through this process of branding. It was all volunteer led. The product you saw on the screen was the kind of the major focus of the brand. The theme was cultivating community. We wordsmith came up with the tagline as citizens. It was a really cool process that we got to do as part of Kickstart. And at the end of that, it ended up not being adopted by our elected officials because they simply didn't understand what they had contracted to do. And so the short version of that story, however, is that the community developed brand in partnership with Thrive ended up kind of becoming a rally flag around which some long-term change has now occurred, including some elected officials are no longer in office, and some of the people who are involved in that process now are, only because there was a recognition that the people are proud of this. People are really proud of this. And so there's a symbology in the art that actually became something that created a community movement, and one with a very positive tone, I would say. And so it's kind of like, that's kind of cool that there's power in bringing more voices to the table rather than fewer. But you've got experts in your community, and I'm of the opinion of, this is Ryan's opinion, but don't be hesitant to involve anybody and everybody. If you have a 2-year or a 4-year school, make sure that your higher education folks are involved, or maybe the primary education, certainly your K-12 educators and superintendent and folks from the central office there. But I don't see her face, but I see Amber Childers is in the room here. I don't know if she wants to unmute or not, but Amber's down at ASU 3 Rivers, and she's also a client of mine. I'm going to be on site at her project tomorrow at the Ritz Theater in downtown Malvern. And there's a beautiful open brick wall on the side of the Ritz Theater that probably needs a mural down there. So, maybe with a little support from our community college, we might have the opportunity to do some work, add some public art there too. So, all of you in this room and on this call represent, you're coming from a corner of the community where you have to be at the table. And, but also think about who's missing. Always ask the question, who's missing? And then just invite them, don't be afraid of it. I think at the end of the day, we can all be proud of the work because we were all in the room when these discussions were being had. So.
Does anybody else have any general questions before I kind of ask Jason and Ryan some of our questions?
I have just a real quick question, and it You know, I'm on the city council in Maumelle, and I am so excited about this, the prospect of doing something like this in our city and getting everybody on board. And we also have a sign ordinance that's very restrictive. This is good to know, very good information. But kind of off that subject a little bit and back to the nuts and bolts. Jason, I think it was you that said that you outlined yours with spray paint.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you find that it shows up better? It's easier to find the lines, or I mean, you said spray paint is not what it used to be. So what exactly do you use?
Okay, so a little bit of my history. I was introduced to graffiti art when I was about 15 or 16 years old. And so I spent a lot of time on
a lot of time on the railroad, I'm assuming.
Trains and bridges, yes ma'am. And so back in the day, it was Krylon. You know, Krylon was the paint to go to. Krylon honestly turned its back on the whole public art scene. It changed its spray paint cans, it changed its caps, honestly watered down its paint a little bit so it didn't cover as well. And so there were a lot of issues. They basically turned their back on graffiti artists. Fast forward ahead to the early 2000s, public arts really started making a comeback in a true art way. Art started being adopted in art galleries and being seen as art, not vandalism, right? And so that them turning their back on the art community really opened the door for other brands to come in. Most locally, what we can buy is from Hobby Lobby, and there's a brand called Ironlak, IRONLAK. And it's a really good aerosol. It covers really, really well. The great thing about these new brands that have come out, though, is the ability to use different size caps. And so with the caps, you can get really, really thin lines or really, really fat lines. And so you can really fill in, large sections. The paint is really high quality. It covers really well, and it will last. I usually, myself personally, I try to guarantee the mural roughly for 7 to 10 years. That's based on some of the exterior paint that Sherwin-Williams has, and then just what I've experienced that I've had. I mean, that's what they paint trains with now. That's what they paint things with now. It's meant to be outside and last a while.
Okay, and with that thought, do you when you're done with your mural, do you put any sort of sealant on it to make it last? Or
so we haven't done it yet. Cabot, we're actually going to be sealing that. Sherwin-Williams has an anti-graffiti protectant. It is a little expensive. I want to say it was somewhere in the $100 range per gallon. I mean, it's up there, and it's a process. It's 2 different cans. They have to be mixed together and all of that stuff. But down in Art Alley, I did some aerosol work. We painted over it with this anti-graffiti protectant. We were only going to leave it on there for about 3 days. We painted over it with the anti-graffiti protectant, and then I went back and graffitied over that. We were only going to leave it on there for about 3 days. Summer in Arkansas, we all got busy. It was hot, and so it ended up being on there for almost a month. Went back and cleaned off the graffiti that I put over that anti-graffiti protectant, and it never touched the mural underneath. It was amazing. So
that's nice. Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
That's really cool.
I didn't know that anti-graffiti.
Who knew? I know.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a little ironic me putting that on there. So
we've all learned something.
Come full
today,
circle.
Right?
Yeah. So Dylan sent out a contact sheet earlier today. You might have seen in your email, and Jason's profile picture on there is pretty remarkable. So I want you to check that out.
That's all the aerosol cans. Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Okay, does anybody else have any more questions? I know it's 2:30 now, but like I said, we'll continue on with the conversation beyond that if anybody has any questions, and I can go through the ones we have pre-written. But before we
Shelby, I've got to go, but I want to thank you so much for having this. This has just been so cool. I have always wondered how they do these great big murals, and I'm kind of dabbled a little bit in art myself. And now that I want to get so involved in, Maumelle, we're so young. We're like, we weren't even We weren't even incorporated till 1984, so we don't have any history, but we do have Canadian geese. And I think that a goose on the side of a building would be super cool.
It would be
I
awesome.
did not know you had Canadian geese, so that's just
Oh, and everybody complains about them, but I think they're beautiful.
Miss
Sometimes-
Williams, sorry.
Go, Jason, I'm sorry.
I was going to say,
Also,
Terry, I'm so glad you're able to join.
feel free to contact me if you have questions.
I wrote it all down here, Jason.
yeah,
Thank you.
because-
You're going to get sick of me, I'm pretty sure, before
No,
this is all
not at all.
over.
And so this is the approach that I take with what I'm doing right now. I can't paint every window. I can't paint every wall. So in that sphere right there, I have an opportunity to teach. And so that's really what I want to do and what I love to do about what I'm doing. Brandy, to kind of go back, I don't know how you guys are doing with the artists. I know you were looking for funding. I don't know if you have a lack of artists, but like Ryan was saying, you have an expert in your community. One of the biggest things that we face as artists is fear. And so that's something that I'm really trying to focus on from my side, is to push these artists to face that fear and realize, hey, I really can, make a living doing this. And so if you got any questions, I'm happy to answer at any time. So
Thank you
Jason,
guys
for
so
everything.
much.
Thank you, Shelby. Thanks, Ryan.
Hi, Brandy. So I know Terry and Brandy are going to leave. Heidi, Alan, Becky, Lori, and Amber, do you all have any questions? Oh, Brandy, I was upset. I didn't know she was staying on.
This is Becky. Thank you so much for all the great information. Jason, I've been following your work. I think I'm a creeper, or what did they call me? The Main Street director in Searcy, Amy Burton, and I are good friends. And
yeah.
So I'm from Hope, Arkansas. We have just started the process with the Department of Heritage grant. And so stay tuned. We're very excited about the future, and I'm writing that grant right now. So I have visited with Amy, and she steered me in your direction, Jason. So
well, I'm happy to answer any questions,
absolutely.
and I really want to focus on getting the local artists involved in these different opportunities.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Shelby. This has been remarkable.
Well, great. Thank you so much for that feedback, Becky. I really appreciate it. And like I said, we can stay on a little bit longer if anybody has any questions. Mayor Lipsmeyer, Amber, or Lori, do you guys have anything? Okay. Well, Jason, and Ryan, I'll talk through these questions just real quick. If there's anything you want to add, just as we wrap up really fast. So we talked about, Jason, and Ryan, can you talk real quick about how the artwork for any projects you've been a part of were chosen? Maybe give a specific example of one of the projects you worked on in the state recently and how that artwork was chosen.
Okay. Ryan, do you want to go first, or?
Well, I'll just kind of generally speak, and again, the hands-on work around here is done by our graphic designers, and then Misty doing the actual painting of it. And so you can see it's kind of a very collaborative process for Thrive, but nevertheless, most of this is uniquely generated by our team here. So we've designed that. And so, in fact, the I Am the Future mural, which you saw there, that's right down here on Ryder Street in Helena, was going to be something different. And because the organization has the word future in their name, it's Kids for the Future, they're like, well, what if we kind of incorporated our name, somehow? So Will took it back to the drawing board, redesigned everything, and incorporated this message. And we're like, it should never have been anything other than this. That's a home run, So that's just part of the design process. And when you're creating that, it's you put away the good for the better. And so fortunately things worked out like that. Other murals, like you saw, the one in Helena, the Helena brand is not one that Thrive developed, but we kind of we have stewardship of that in terms of working with those elements and proliferating that, extending that brand throughout the community. And so that was just an application of So how is the artwork chosen? It can be done from the artist's heart. It can be done from the commissioner says it has to look like this. It can be the building owner who says, I would like this on the side of my building. And if the building owner is also the one who's paying out the money, that gives you a lot of incentive to carry out that vision. So, but Jason, your experience is pretty wide in this. So I'm really interested in hearing how that works for you.
Yeah, very much so. I've been able and been fortunate to approach it from both sides. You know, I've had people contact me because they like my style, they like my art, especially when it comes to the street art version of it. However, a lot of the stuff that we have worked on here in Searcy, we have put that out for community vote. And so basically we would say, here's the wall. We opened it up to submissions, had a bunch. The very first one, you know, it was interesting. We basically just said this was an open bid, like, you know, submit your artwork. We got like 3 bids out of it. We're like, that's not a lot of selection there, you know. The moment that we called it a competition and said that there was $1,000 reward, it really opened up. So we ended up having like 28, 29 submissions, you know, and we have a committee through that Think Art project. We had a committee that would vote on, we would basically narrow it down to 2 or 3, and then we would put it out for public vote, you know, because I mean, you would get submissions that the experience just wasn't there. And then we would get some that the art was awesome, but you know that there's no way that they would be able to do that on that scale. Like they just wouldn't work. So there were some predestined things that we kind of had set in place that would remove that. But once we narrowed it down to 2 or 3, that we would open it up for the community. So that's been the 2 ways. It's funny. There's always 2 murals. They want the postcard or they want the American flag. and that's every community I go into, it's those 2, you know. And so we always encourage, or I say I always encourage to, hey, let's make the first mural kind of fun, bright, exciting, something different, not a typical postcard. For me, I always narrow my art down to 2 different categories: interactive and informational. Informational is exactly what it sounds like. It's you know, the welcome to, you know, our history, you know, all of that. That's the informational. The other one being interactive, which is really, you know, like Will said, it was amazing to hear him use that term, selfie culture. I've been using that for about 1.5 years because I ran into that with Art Alley. But that selfie culture makes it an interactive mural, you know. And so, yeah, from those 2 elements, you know, that's usually where we want to do something kind of bright and fun, and then we do something that's kind of informational or patriotic.
Yeah, I love that you explained that, Jason. And I think that thinking in those terms makes it very intentional in the way that we use art in our communities. So just thinking outside of, this is a way to beautify our downtown or area of our community, but really thinking about when people share that art on an online platform, especially on social media, you want to grab people's attention and say, you know, oh, I would love to go visit that. And especially during COVID, when we're looking for ways to get out with our families, especially kids, and finding something to do that's safe. A road trip to Searcy or to Batesville, and it was mentioned, or to Russellville, which Christy Graham's talking about, or Helena, West Helena. And, you know, looking at that public art, walking around outside, visiting some shops and restaurants in the community, and making a day out of it and attracting some of those tourism dollars to make it more community and economic development focused. I love that you broke it down that way, and that intentionality. One other thing, that the only other thing I think we haven't covered, that I want to touch on before we close out is, how do the communities or organizations you work with, do they market the mural? Like when it goes up, like how do they spread the word about a new mural? Or do they just kind of let it be word of mouth? And then also, how typically is the reaction to those murals? Like, do people normally know it's coming, or is it just kind of a, oh, it sprung up one day and everybody's like, oh, that's cool? Like, how does that typically go? Or what would you suggest as a plan for that situation?
Yeah, so starting out with the Think Art project here in Searcy, again, we were really intentional about our approach to the community. It's everybody has an opinion, you know, and no matter what you do, you're going to have some negative Nancy's in there that want to complain about something, right? Fortunately, though, the art movement, the public art movement, was so new that we had very little pushback, very little at all. I mean, the first probably 6 months or 8 months, we think we got somewhere around 2 or 3 murals done during that time. Some of them were through the Think Art project, and others were business owners that contacted me. I could count on one hand kind of the negative comments and negative feedback that we got. I mean, it was really amazing. After we started kind of getting it a year or so into it, you know, we did get a whole bunch of murals really, really fast. And so that was a concern, but that was something that we approached very early on, even with Amy Burton and Main Street, is that, you know, one of our rules were we were not going to paint on a historic building that wasn't already painted. If it was original brick, that was off limits. Like we had some criteria set forth. I think that freaked a lot of people out in the beginning because, you know, a lot of people did know my history and they could see some of my graffiti artwork and this guy's going to paint everything, you know. But once they found out that we really were conscious of historic preservation, we got so much positive feedback from that. So that's one thing that I think, again, approaching it from the artist side, they don't think about that too much. I love history and kind of consider myself a historian. And so that was something that was key to me right off the bat. But a lot of artists don't think like that. You know, it's just like, hey, this is a great spot for a mural. Let's put a mural here. I think you can have too much, you can have too many, and then you got to be conscious of the history of that neighborhood. So.
Yeah, it's really a matter of curation, right? And so there's a high level of accountability there with the Think Art project that we tried to learn from in Lone Oak, because we had a really cool mural go up and then everybody's like, oh, we should do 10 of them. It's like, oh, well, actually, one mural is great, but 10 murals are not 10 times as great if it's not objectively good art, which that statement right there is like, well, wait a minute, how do you determine? And so Matt Faulkner at Think and you, Jason, have kind of taught me, and I will tell you the key is the Think Art project is a fantastic structure because it does what we talked about earlier. It involves the entire community. You have the planning commission, you have elected officials, you have your arts council, you have your art educators, you have your artists like you, you have benefactors, you have property owners, you have Main Street people, all at this table. And then there's a little creative push from the organization side, but there's a lot of accountability. So when the thing goes up, it's like, well, it wasn't just one guy decided this was great and did it 10 times. There's, to use Shelby's word, an intentional rollout and a programming aspect of how this works. And it's a completely different scenario, but Fort Smith, same way, just on a different scale. It's curated highly specifically from an international pool of artists, using a different pool of money that's all privately benefacted, and they literally just, not overnight, but kind of almost overnight, just blanketed Fort Smith with all of this public art. And it's remarkable, but it wasn't a very democratic process. It was a highly centralized process, and yet it works because the ones who are creating it have a very real sense of trust in the artist that they're working with. Absolutely. So it looks different for every community, but accountability has to be there. It can't be Ryan deciding that, oh, this is a great place to do it, and I think it should be this, because then it's just my vision. It's not the community's vision, right?
Larger communities have a lot more freedom than the smaller communities. You know, if you're in a town where everybody knows everybody, you run into the situation where everybody has an opinion. you know.
Right, it's
And
true.
so, if you're, I don't know if I'd want to be alone on that island, being the one that decided, hey, this is what's going on, you know. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things that I'm kind of learning, and particularly in times that we're in right now, is that clarity is the highest value almost. If it's not the highest value, clarity is one of the highest values. And so when you talk about, again, being intentional, whether it's an interactive mural, whether it's an informational mural, I've heard discussions about, well, we could do this historic mural and it would look like this. And then, you know, it's an agricultural scene. I'm like, we need to understand how this can be misinterpreted and therefore achieve the complete opposite of bringing a community together, just because there's no clarity or context behind what is happening there. Likewise with an interactive mural, that, you know, you talk about how do people find out, how do you market it, I think was the crux of the question. Well,
Right.
in selfie culture, it markets itself because people are taking their own pictures. You can't control that at all,
Right.
other than you can control the focus of the work and maybe create a hashtag or an @ sign to tag your account, or maybe the community's account. But other than that, it's in the hands of the users, which is really scary. But also, they know how to use it. They know how to respond, and it begins to be kind of a love story between the community and the artist and the artwork, which is the interactive is just so fun and it's neat. But you got to know how people are. You got to anticipate how people are going to be using. Be kind of savvy on the social media for sure.
Yeah, that one example is what Cabot's doing through their arts foundation that they have. I think it's Cabot Arts Foundation, and no, Cabot Foundation for Arts and Culture. Okay, and they've done an amazing job bringing in artists from around the state. They have at least 3 murals that's gone up in the past 2 months. I've got one that's coming up there, hopefully here in a couple of weeks, if it will ever stop raining. And but they do a great job on Facebook. I mean, they really promote their art and artists really well.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I wanted to draw out from both of you, is thinking intentionally about how when you roll out art in your community, yes, people are going to interact with it, like Ryan said, individually the way they want to. But if you can be a little bit intentional of, we have this hashtag, or we have, you know, this is the page that we have set up for arts in our community. So you can try to connect back with that base of people that are engaging with your art. And I also am glad you mentioned Cabot, because if you're talking about a town that kind of sprung up overnight, Cabot, yeah. Cabot's a good example. Earlier when Terry was talking about Maumelle, so you can create places that feel connected and get that feel for the traditional, you know, you might not have that traditional downtown that some of our communities are fortunate to have, but any community can create a place that people feel like they belong to with art, which I think is awesome.
And that's, art does that exact thing. You know, when I'm out there painting on the walls, I have people from every walk of life. I have homeless people come up, and very, very nice cars pull up, and people stop and they comment on it. And, you know, thankfully it's always positive, you know, but to be able, I mean, if you don't think about it, you don't ever think about it. But when I'm there on the wall, I mean, I realize the range of people that I have admiring the art and commenting on the art, you know, and I mean, that's just a microcosm of what it really does through the whole community, you know. And I believe we didn't get into it too much in the main group, but that's one of the big things that, you know, from whenever I started this, I was just one artist starting this, you know. Now I've got state senators and representatives on my phone. I think there's a reason why there's a push for this in that realm, because they understand, hey, people respond to this. It's relatively cheap, it's relatively fast, and it really does change the conversation. And, you know, right now we need more positivity than ever. So.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we do. And oh, I'm sorry, Shelby.
No, it's just, that preach it.
Yeah. And because there's power in that, that means there's a great stewardship behind the work that you do, Jason, and behind the work that we're doing as designers to make sure that we're unifying our communities and not dividing them in the work that we do.
Absolutely.
And that's a difficult charge, but it's one that folks like you are capable of doing and have a great track record of doing that.
Yeah.
I want to jump in. This is Becky. I want to jump in again when you were talking about unifying and not dividing.
Yes.
We have one mural on the side of the chamber, and I'm the chamber director, and then we have another mural in our historic district. We are a fairly new Main Street community. We're still in the downtown network program. So thank you, Jason, for speaking about historic preservation, understanding, and respect.
Yes, ma'am.
We certainly appreciate that. But as we have released news, just individual to individual conversation about a mural project, we're already getting all the feedback you can imagine. And of course, we are the birthplace of President Clinton, so y'all will understand this. The unifying ideas are watermelons, trains. We are the worldwide headquarters for clip speakers, so a lot of music heritage. And the divisive point is we hear it nearly every week. Do not paint Bill Clinton on a wall.
What about a saxophone? That would be cool.
Because some said if you paint him on the wall, we will put a bullseye on it. So we know.
Oh no.
Yeah. Watermelons and trains and music, we can roll with that. And John,
yeah,
that's we're already getting the feedback. And like you said, Jason, a smaller community, we fully expect we're going to get more and more.
Well, and one of it. Go ahead, Jason.
Okay. If first and foremost, the first one's always the hardest one, right? Because you do still have that situation where everybody has an opinion. It's the first one. Everybody's nervous about what it's going to be.
Right.
I always encourage the first one to be one that it's the old adage: don't talk about religion, don't talk about politics. You know, so I always encourage that first one to be something super bright, super positive, just something that just feeds the community. I wouldn't go with the historic. I wouldn't go with the patriotic necessarily, unless it's, for example, we have one going up in Newport, but it's in a kind of a veterans memorial garden area, and so that one makes sense, right? But I would push, you know, the first one's going to be the hardest. Everybody's going to have an opinion. However, if you have the funding and you can get it accomplished, it needs to be something that's bright, colorful, fun, and just positive.
Yeah.
One thing that we did do from the get-go, we called upon the consultants from Main Street, Arkansas, to join us, and we did a walkthrough of the downtown, and allowed them to make the best choice selection for the site instead of any of our downtown business owners, committee members at this point, or even our arts council. So they said, yeah, make us the dirty ones, but they know what's best. And
right.
So, this grant, though, is allowing us to just produce one mural. And that's what's kind of, some of the people are finding that it's a difficult pill to swallow, so to speak. Because, we have already, on the flip side, the Tourism Commission has already committed $10,000 for our mural project. So we're going to be able immediately to use that as our matching portion of the Department of Heritage grant. So we're pleased about that. That was an easy thing for them to step up and do. What a blessing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh no, I think Ryan froze.
I think so.
No, that's not a good picture for him to freeze.
You need to screenshot that and send it to him.
Well, we'll have the videos.
Wow, he was thinking a long time about this, isn't he?
Yeah, he was really good at keeping his face that still. Oh gosh, that was funny. Ryan, are you there?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I lost my connection. I really appreciate Becky being so thoughtful about how they're approaching this. I if y'all can hear me, I just wanted to mention one thing too, which would be the idea that if you have a strong brand, like we mentioned, maybe just the community brand is a neutral starting point to do a variation on the theme of that, using the principles that in the branding guide, if you have one. If you don't have one, consider undertaking a branding exercise, and then let the mural be the first outgrowth of that. It's like, oh yeah, that's our new look. That's what we look like now, and we like it, you know. And it's big and it's bright, and like Jason said, positive. And so there's another idea.
Okay.
And then just one thing that kind of struck. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just said I like that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing is that whoever's paying for it, the money question a lot of times neutralizes a lot of that conversation. I'm sure, Jason, you've seen that in your experience as well.
I really try my best to keep it to 1 to 2 people involved.
Right.
We did have an example in Heber where I had one person funding it, one person kind of leading the charge and doing kind of a match with it. So those 2 people were funding it, but then we had the building owner. And we approached with a couple of different styles that really stuck with the brand that Heber Springs had. And they were 100% dead set that if it wasn't an American flag, they weren't interested, and which we just did not want to go that route first. And so we had to find another wall, but
I think that's a good lesson, Jason. Sometimes you just have to move on. And eventually I think when that person probably looks back and says, well, maybe I should have compromised. And maybe in the future, they'll be more willing to.
Yeah, they've come back to the table and have some offers now. So
good. Good to hear. Okay, guys. Well, we are almost 30 minutes over. So if we don't have anything else, I think I'm going to wrap it up. And I just want to thank Jason and Ryan again. This was a fantastic conversation. And Becky, Lori, Amber, Amy, kudos to you for sticking around that extra time. But I really hope that everybody feels like they got value out of this workshop. And I know I for sure did. I learned so much. And I'm just so thankful that we were able to host this. And we'll be following up with everyone very soon with the recording and the contact information. We'll send that out again to everyone to make sure that you're able to contact Jason or Ryan or any of our other speakers and panelists throughout the day. And with that, we'll close it out and I'll let you guys head out.
Awesome. See you guys.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank y'all.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
How are you guys doing?
Good.
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 I'm going to ask if you can turn on your camera. I'm going to ask that you do, just so that we can see everyone, and it helps with the interaction a little bit.
Hey, this is Christy. I'm here and I cannot get my video to work during this whole time. I've tried everything. So I'm not sure what's going on. I'm very sorry.
Oh yeah, no worries at all. Well, I think we're gonna go ahead and get started. But okay. So I'm Dylan. I'm with CCED, and for our panelists today, we have Christy Graham, who's the executive director of Discover Russellville. So I'm also based in Russellville. I'm actually working from home today in Russellville. So I'm really excited to hear from Christy about the murals that they've done in Russellville. So I'm just going to hand it over to Christy.
Sure. Thank you so much. I love talking about this. When I started into murals, my job really didn't entail murals, but me and Danielle, which is downtown Main Street executive director, what happened was the mayor had a group of the community leaders come together for a meeting, and he just wanted to help get some clear vision for Russellville, where we're going, some things we really needed to work on. He had some money people there. He had people interested in Russellville. And so from that, we took a list of the things we would love to see over the next couple years, some things we wanted to see in a year, and some things maybe 3 or 5 year projects. So that's where this started for me. I was a part of this group, and in the list was murals. It's something we didn't have any murals. I mean, we had maybe 1 or 2 little bitty that a private business painted on the side of their wall. And so about the same time as all this was happening, I started the I Heart Russellville with a red heart campaign for our community, because if some of y'all aren't aware of Russellville, we've just been in a political battle over a casino coming to Russellville. And so we've had such negative press, and I was just super tired of the negative. And so Russellville's a fabulous community, and I wanted people to start talking about the great things Russellville had. That is my job, to sell Russellville. And so I just said, we're going to bring out some positives. If you're proud to be living in Russellville, would you support this marketing campaign? Would you put a sticker on your window if I brought it to you? Would you do these things? And they all agreed. I had people taking out billboards that said, I heart Russellville, Cogswell Motors supports Russellville. We've been in this community for this long. And so that's where our initiative of Mural came out of. So December, I have monthly board meetings, and then literally in the month of November, I went to my board and I said, I have a crazy idea. I really need y'all. If y'all love me, I need y'all to support this. And I said, I need $2,500. I'll find an artist that will paint I Heart Russellville downtown. I want this to be like the kickoff mural. I really think if we can get one mural going, that it will create more. It'll create interest and people will see, and then it will just multiply, or at least that's what my hopes were. And so they backed me, thankfully. I went on vacation like the second week in December. The artist painted it the whole week I was gone, and I pulled back into town, and that Saturday I ran downtown and my mural was painted, and I was so excited. And I had people just texting me like, good job, Christy, way to go. Like, and it was just the creation of murals for Russellville. And from that, and we used the hashtag I Heart Russellville. And so from that, you know, lots of things have sparked. So fast forward to February, Leadership Russellville, we had 38 people through the Chamber of Commerce Leadership Program. They contacted me and said, we do a project every year. We raise the money for it and we see it through to the end. Would you allow us to take on, would you come and tell us the next 3 murals you would want? And I was like, would I? Heck yes, I would. And so I came down and they accepted the project. And so they did the next 3 murals and were completed by summer, which was a massive, like 30 feet tall high mural as you enter one of our entrances into Russellville. And it has a ton of pictures that all represent Russellville. It has Arkansas Tech, it has some historic buildings, it has the nuclear, our power plant here because they helped pay for it. They raised 100% of the funds. They hired the artists, they prepped the walls, they had all 3 of those done. So then Arkansas Tech was in the process and they got a grant through the Wingate Foundation and brought an artist in residence in from New York, from Brooklyn, and she was in the process of doing a huge mural that just actually got behind schedule because of the pandemic, but it just recently went up at ATU. And so we're already in the works for 2 more that are going to be finished by November 1st, because I have to have them for some print pieces. So I've given them like strict deadlines, they have to be done. But it did accomplish my goal, which was if you build it, they will start and they will continually, people will want more and more. And so it worked. And so some of the things that people keep asking me is, where do you get your money? So I asked my A&P board, which is our local tourism, to fund the first one. And the rest have either been, some of it's been private donations, some of it's been grants. Union Pacific gave us a $10,000 grant, matching grant. We've had Department of Heritage and then the Wingate Foundation. So that's where some of ours came from. Did I know what I was doing when I started this? Absolutely not. But it's been fun to go through the process. I had to go in front of the Historic Commission for the downtown one, work through all of that. So there's been obstacles, but it's been super fun and it's so addicting because I'm just planning for more and more. So that's kind of where we started. I can answer any questions, but I can also talk. I'm a speech major and I can talk for a while. So I would love to answer any questions anybody has.
Awesome. And I was just going to share my screen and show you guys a couple of the murals. So this is the I Heart Russellville mural that she was talking about. That's kind of the one that started it, right? And then we had the artist in residence from New York at ATU. So this is now up in ATU where I go walk my dog and my son. And we pass by this all the time and it's really beautiful. And then this is another one that the Artists in Residence did, I believe, for River Valley Food for Kids, which is a local nonprofit.
And she stayed through COVID and just kind of got bored once the other one was done and wasn't ready to go back to Brooklyn with everything that was going on. So she just did this one for us. So it was just kind of a bonus.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Great. Well, yeah. So does anyone have any like specific questions for Christy?
Yes,
Hey,
Oh,
go ahead.
I just wanted to ask about what would be the, do you have a special rate that you pay someone to do a mural? Is it like per hour? Is it per size? How does that work?
So a local artist here does it, he has to see it and then the size, and then he does it like per square feet. He had a specific fee, but Leadership Russellville actually did a bid process on theirs because they only had limited funds. And so they had a couple different artists bid the big mural out on the highway. One of their murals, they actually got donated from a local artist. So I have found that in all situations, they've kind of all varied depending on the situation.
And Sarah and Missy, please feel free to jump in if you have any insight.
Yeah, I think ours would be the same, where it's been a variety of things. We are pretty heavily funded by foundations as Thrive itself, and part of our job is creating murals with kids. But Misty has done more privately that she can talk about, but A&P commissions are a big part of ours, private donations.
I've had funding from Arkansas Community Foundation. When I charge out a mural, I try to think about the number of hours that it will take me, plus supplies, plus if I'm going to be on scaffolding or I need to rent a bucket truck, and then those will be added fees. But I usually think of my hourly rate times the amount of hours is what I usually try to do.
Nice. All right, great. Miranda, did you have a question?
I was wondering, on that picture that you showed of, I think you said it was a children's food pantry or something. What is that? Is it metal? Is it wood? It looks like it's attached. Did you hear the whole question?
Dylan,
Yeah.
can you show that picture again?
Sure thing. Let me pull that up.
I'm pretty sure that was one of them. I've had two, well, I think there's three that have actually been painted on marine plywood. So the one at Tech, she was able to paint during the winter months, pre-paint in a huge facility that they weren't currently using. It was like a warehouse. And that artist was able to pre-paint it. And also there was a smaller fish one that went out at Lake Dardanelle State Park, and it's pre-painted on marine plywood, I guess is what you call that. And that way it's weatherproof. I think they said it was like kind of some of the material that you make like fishing dock, like the dock part out of was my understanding of it. Yeah, and that is also able to come off. That's what I thought. That one is the same. It's able to come off. I think it's a marine plywood. Miranda, if you, I have my email. I can find out exactly if you want me to.
Yeah, that would be awesome, because I think that's really interesting for it to not actually be on the building, but removable or portable. That would be a good option.
Yeah, and just to bring up, that's one thing we've kind of talked through when I went through the Historic Commission. They're not real big about us painting on any buildings downtown unless it was already a painted building. They won't let us paint a non-painted brick. And so we've kind of dodged some stuff with that by using that, because it is a removable structure. And so I know that that's helped sometimes. So if that's an obstacle or something like that, and people don't want it on a permanent wall, maybe they're leasing the building, that would be a great option.
And if I can chime in, when we work on mural workshops, it doesn't always have to be on a wall for us. We have some mural workshops coming up where we're going to paint some crosswalks. So that would be on the ground. We have a mural workshop coming up with kids where we're going to paint the surface of a basketball court. And then talking about like
painted on pressure treated wood or marine plywood. We're building a river trail in the river park, and we're going to paint some large kind of birds and animals, paint that on the wood here at the Thrive Studio, and then we will cut around those, cut those out, and then we will attach those to trees and posts down within the river park and sort of have these freestanding murals. Also, those postcards that I showed earlier, those were on pressure treated plywood and outside, moved to the space.
And it's much easier to use a jigsaw than you would think.
Yeah, it's not that hard.
And we just had our first like 3D mural. So it was a mountain scene and had a bike trail, and it's on one of our current bike trails. And then they had an old like retro bike that you can get on and take your picture in front of. So we're really trying to throw in some 3D murals because we think that's just super fun, and do some creative stuff like that downtown. Paint some different objects. Back in the 50s and 60s, the meters downtown were made here in Russellville. So we're trying to get a hold of some some meters, and we want to have them painted. So different things like that's what we're looking at.
That's great. And I was going to ask Christy, so how did you or the community kind of decide the artwork for these murals that are coming into Russellville?
The I Heart Russellville was super simple, so that was easy. And then when the Leadership Russellville approached me and Danielle, I mean, really, we're a committee of two right now. I mean, it really and truly we just decided we were going to tackle this, and we've had full support of people, but I mean, it's literally been the two of us just being like, hey, where's our next one? How are we going to get it funded? Let's do it. And so it's kind of been simple like that. So they asked us what our vision would be, and we had the help of a local artist, but then they showed us pictures from their artist, and we got to approve them, and that's how we've kind of moved forward. The same thing happened with the artist from Tech. When they submitted their application to be chosen, they had to submit, they had to learn about this community because it had to be community based, and they submitted hand-drawn photos, and that was part of our, when we picked her, we got to see their photo that they would, their drawing that they would like to do.
Awesome.
I would love to see this huge grand committee, but there's actually not.
Right. And Misty and Sarah, is that kind of a similar process with the murals that you guys have done in Helena?
Yeah, typically we're kind of the driving force behind it all, and saying, we want to create this, we have the funding, we have the team. And so our process mostly looks like getting approval from whoever owns the wall that we want to paint on. We usually pick the wall, we say we want it here, and we figure out who owns that wall. And we ask them, and a couple of times it's gone a little bit beyond that, is trying to figure out, they own it, but somebody else leases it, so the lease person needs to also approve it. But Misty's done more for the city, that probably have more people involved in the approval process.
Yeah, just submitting like a mock-up to the AMP Commission or to whoever would be funding it or approving it. I've worked like that as well. But we usually do design the mural, prep the wall, draw the mural on the wall, have it all ready. I go to the paint store, get all the paint, get all the supplies together. So the kids really get to join in, the volunteers really get to join in on the fun part, the really visible part that they get to say, I did that, I made that look nice.
So we plan for the week. This might be a little bit off track of that, but we plan for, October 5th through the 9th is when we're working with kids. So then we work backwards from there to say, okay, now we really need to start designing the mural. And it typically ends up being 4 days in advance that we actually start designing the mural.
It drives me crazy.
Will and I are like, oh, we should probably start working on that. Aren't we planning a mural for the next couple of days? And so then it's a little bit of a fast track process, but we also know that that's a little bit unique to Helena, and that we can call a friend and say, do you know who owns that building? And they say, yeah, it's so-and-so, here's their number. And we can kind of accomplish that. And there's I don't think we've ever had any pushback on any murals. And we've always had, great support. And I think that probably goes a lot with what our the content of our murals are. All of them are community-based, uplifting, empowering. And I have heard things like Clarksdale has had a lot of pushback with their murals. And the majority of their pushback is that their murals can be, the designs can be read a couple of different ways, you know, and so that's one thing. So I think if you have a community in mind or a community mindset about what you're creating, that the approval process isn't actually that scary, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's a benefit of a small town is that everyone's one phone call away.
Right.
Miranda, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was gonna say, has anyone done, I guess, like a community engagement session or forum, or, you know, if you want to do something that is very inclusive and has a lot of community engagement, has anybody walked through that process of visioning or mural planning, other than you guys kind of coming up with a design that, you know, you feel like is going to be widely accepted, or maybe your community already has a strong brand? When it's not that case, has anybody walked through planning?
We haven't done it specifically for painting a mural, but that is the entire basis that we do when we're branding a community, is starting from scratch. And what we do is exactly what you're saying. We have usually whoever is in charge. So, you know, the mayor approached us and wants to start a branding process. We say, you find your stakeholders and get them in a room, and then we lead about an hour or so workshop. And feel free, if this is going over time, to reach out about this a little bit more in depth. But we lead an hour-long workshop of just guiding people through identifying how they want their community to be perceived, where they want to be in 10 years, what the negativity is in the community, what the positive aspects are, and we kind of narrow that down to create, really, but at the end of it, we want to have some taglines for a city, and that guides the branding process. And I think you could do something extremely similar for a mural. It's just, and it really helps to have a kind of a third party outside person to be the one guiding the questions, because there's no question about, well, why is this person leading the questions? You know, it's really easy for an outside person to kind of push and prod some answers out of people, and guide the conversation a little bit easier than somebody who's there or from there.
Yeah, I'll say I sat in on the branding process in Van Buren, and it was just such a cool thing to see, to kind of get the community members to lay out their idea of their community, and it was really good, just cool to see that visioning process, and I think that would inform your mural process as well. Yeah, and if you guys need to go, feel free to go. But if you have some more questions, then we can stay on and keep answering questions. So do you guys have anything else? Brenda?
Yeah, I was going to ask, when you have the students, I'm kind of interested in using students also, but how is that funded? Is it just strictly materials, or, you know, I guess Thrive you have to be funded somehow, I'm assuming, and through this process. So if it's not through Thrive, like if it's several artists that design this and then try to get the community involved and get some volunteers to do, how do the artists get paid for it? How would that work? Do the volunteers, you know, what, do you understand what I'm asking?
I do. And I can tell you what we've done, and Sarah can chime in as well. So Thrive is funded through grants because they are a nonprofit, but they're also funded by their design work. So that design work that you saw for cities, they also design for school districts. That money that they pay for that design work is able to come back into Thrive and then fund the programs with the kids. And so they pay me to come out and work with the kids. So they hire me on as the mural consultant, and I lead the workshop. I make sure I go get the paint. I start thinking through building location. I start thinking through theme, but then everyone comes together at Thrive and we solidify that, and then Sarah and Will make it look amazing on the computer, and then we put that on the wall. So we are able to get quite a bit of our funding that way, and that pays me and that pays Thrive for their time. But also we work with people in the community that love what Thrive does. So on the future mural, that building owner, a lot of times, he's worked with us also on the fire hydrant project where we painted the fire hydrants, but he'll say, I want to buy the paint, bring me the receipts for the paint and the supplies, and we'll take that to him. And then he usually says, and I want to have a pizza party for the kids. And they love that because on Friday, we joke with them that they only come to Mural Workshop for the blue Gatorade, but I think they really do like hanging out with us and they have pride in what they accomplish. But having that pizza party on Fridays is really nice. So that I've had, we used to have a Sherwin-Williams in town, and I would work with them on donating some paint, and they would usually maybe donate up to a certain amount. You could also talk, I'm right now, I've made a mural mock-up for Marvel, Arkansas, and they are working with going to like Rotary Club, Kiwanis Club, seeing if they have some funding in their budget. Also, getting different businesses within your city. So the murals in Fort Smith, they have little plaques that they've made that go beneath each mural and say like, so-and-so business or so-and-so family sponsored this mural. So you could think about people in your community that really like the idea about murals and see if people pitch in.
And I think if you work on establishing a small team to begin with, and you guys each have kind of a brainstorming session of who could we approach about this or what grants could we apply, you don't necessarily have to be an existing organization to raise funding for this. I think you can bring a little team together and find lots of funding sources without being a recognized 501c3 nonprofit. You just might not qualify for the exact same grants we are, but there's a lot of different sources of funding.
You can also reach out to nonprofits in your area and see if possibly if there's a grant that you know would fund a mural, and you can write that grant, but you go through their nonprofit for the funding and then they support the mural. And that's another option.
Especially if you have like an arts nonprofit in your town or something, or an education-based one.
And Dustin also mentioned crowdfunding. So he started a fundraiser on Facebook and raised $1,000 in 4 hours, because I don't know anyone who's against having a mural in their town. So I feel like that's something that people are willing to pitch in for. Christy, did you have any examples of funding for the murals in Russellville?
Well, we did A&P. Then they did private funded through leadership. They went out a lot to, like they said, a couple of the organizations, and they did really well. And I think they had to raise around, I think they raised right at $18,000 or $19,000 amongst those three. So, and they just went out privately and did that to businesses and nonprofits and different organizations. And then just those grants that I mentioned are the other ways. The Union Pacific matching grant and the Department of Heritage is the way that we've been able to go so far.
Awesome. Any other questions? And I did want to highlight, we have our AmeriCorps Vista, who's based in Hot Spring County, Gretchen Ritchie. And she just did a community engagement type mural for the 9/11 Day of Service. So she had something painted, and then she invited community members to dip their hand in paint and put their handprint on the wall. So I think that was a really cool way to kind of get the community involved and make it like a really collaborative process. So that was really nice. Yeah, if no one has any other questions, we are going to be sending out some follow-up material, some notes, presentations, a video of this and the other presentation. And yeah, if you're interested in some of the stuff that Thrive does, feel free to contact them. The branding process was amazing in Van Buren just to watch that happen. And you saw all the murals that they've done. So they're an amazing resource and someone really good to get connected with if you want that level of art in your downtown. And Sarah, did you have something?
I was just going to say thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. And yeah, thank you guys so much for coming. We really appreciate it. Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Christy.
You're
Bye.
welcome. Thanks, Dylan.